Parents with a disabled child, do you ever regret having children? Why or why not? Hi, mom of a 15-year-old boy born with Soto syndrome, autism, PDD/NOS, global pattern development delay, oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and a myriad of other cognitive and intellectual disabilities. What does all of that mean? He is a literal giant. No, really, he is medically classified as a giant and is a typical Sotos, who very much wants to be like his same age peers but is very much in his own little world of Playhouse Disney, Disney Junior, and Star Wars. He is a loving, sweet, funny kid until he isn't, and his triggers vary from day to day. Then he becomes violent. Physical aggression, property destruction, self-harm, choking, biting, skin picking, nose picking. He is a very smart person who is also extremely manipulative. Whether that manipulation is on purpose, we don't know. My son is only one of 10,000 people in the world with his specific array of diagnosis and one of 25 with his genetic makeup. We know of only one other peer in the US like him, and that young man lives in Michigan. We've never reached out to the family, but we've thought about it. My son requires 24/7 care, special schools, special camps, meds, doctors. Because of his size, 6'6" and 340 pounds, we have to special order clothing, underwear, pajamas, shoes, size 18 4E, and socks. We have a home care provider to give us breaks. I recently quit working full-time because the boy was having a crash and burn cycle, which then played a part in my own crash and burn. We are not rich, but we work hard. My husband took extra shifts and I went to freelancing. We've gotten our son somewhat on track, but on Friday my husband called me in a panic while I was having an afternoon to myself before our daughter's track meet in another town 30 minutes away. Our son attacked him and he had to call the police. It was kind of the leftovers from a meltdown requiring restraints from the night before. I raced home. LEOs were absolutely wonderful. My son calmed before they arrived. My poor husband was really upset and scratched up. We have never had to call for police help before. It was a really sad milestone in our son's development. Do I regret having my son? Yes and no. It breaks my heart to see him struggle. It rips me to shreds to see him want to travel and drive and have friends and be a cool dude like he says, but it just isn't possible. It is emotionally, physically, mentally, and financially draining. My husband is my third husband, and he is amazing. My son's father has nothing to do with him. This lifestyle can rip relationships apart, and that is hard. I don't have any friends. My daughter, who is 15 months younger than her big brother and who was an oops baby before we ever knew my son was high needs and suffering at times, we work really hard to give her every opportunity in the world. My parents help with her a lot. She loves her brother, but does not have a high tolerance for any of his bullcrap, so in many ways it is a typical brother-sister relationship and the most normal thing in our lives. I don't like that everyone struggles. I regret that part. I regret the pain this causes to my son and loved ones. But my son saved me. I was a real piece of crap human, not a good wife, not even a good mom when the kids were little. I had no ambition, no motivation. I was a full-blown alcoholic that was barely functioning. I should have been dead, in jail, and all other horrible things, but he saved me. I've always known that I am pretty much the only person he has. I'm his human. He needs me. I understand him and know him better than anyone. I have seen people dismiss him and kind of figuratively toss him aside. I didn't really know what my light bulb moment was, but I remember slapping a guy across the face for yelling at my son and calling him a female dog for screaming, and really being mad someone would say that about my son. This was probably 12 years ago, around the same time I also began to have a real sensitivity to the R word. To this day, I partner with Special Olympics and Best Buddies to increase awareness to spread the word to end the word. I was 22 when my son was born. I had a lot of growing up to do that I fought against for a long time. I was an idiot before the word existed. Meanwhile, I had this kid who needed an adult, and then I had another kid who needed an adult. It took me a while, but I grew up. I learned about special education, the system, doctors, lingo, and have been a fierce advocate of persons with disabilities living a good quality of life. I am not a psycho, puzzle piece wielding warrior mom who is in all of the Facebook groups and area support groups. F that crap. I do things my own way. It helps that I'm more of a solitary person by nature to begin with, so the isolation that can come with this lifestyle isn't so bad for me. I'm pretty calm. I advocate strongly. I know my crap. I vaccinate. No, vaccinations did not and do not cause autism. We don't do the crap science diets because there is not a diet that is going to cure this, and there is not a diet that will make this better. I do homeopathic things for some comfort of my own, but the pseudoscience moms can just keep all of that crap over in their corner. And I'll stay in my lane, and that's that. We do track his food on MyFitnessPal and watch what he eats and use calories in and calories out for him. He is built like a brick crap house. He needs a little help when it comes to food intake. I love my son for what he has done for me. He made me see the world in a different way. He made me compassionate and kind and strong and articulate. He made me a lifelong student. He made me an expert in my kid. He made me an objective and learn how to play devil's advocate. He has forced me to be social. He has shown me that other people are good. He has shown me that people who are a-holes aren't worth our time. He has shown me how to laugh and how to love and how to care without limits. He has shown me bravery and courage under fire. He has made me an expert in conflict resolution, problem solving, and research. He has taught me a lot of what I know about being an adult and good human, and I'm learning more every day. I don't talk about my son a lot to other people, especially on the interwebs. I don't post to social media much about my son because I believe that whether he understands me trying to preserve his dignity and right to privacy or not, I respect him and I want to do that for him. I talk to my husband, care worker, my own therapist, and that's kind of it. So please pardon my wall of text. It's been a rough few days with the big guy, but dang it, I love him to pieces. My kids are my world. My son saved me. My daughter did too, in a different way. I literally could not survive without these little people, who I refuse to believe are growing up. I'm a young mom, 38 with a 15 and 14-year-old, but I'm glad for what that has done for me and them and how we've kind of come up together. So, Redditors, too long didn't read. I have regrets for the pain, the worry, struggle, isolation, and limits. The lifestyle is hard as heck. I don't regret what the lifestyle has given me and how it changed me. It is selfish to hear, but it's true. So my duty is to give my son the best quality of life possible. Stories to always be better, do more, and have fun is something I don't regret. We will always have Santa and the Easter Bunny. We will always have toys in our home. We will have a child at home long after he is legally an adult. We will have fun and love and do our best. It's a unique parenting challenge and life that I wouldn't have had without him, so I'll take it. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. As I said earlier, I don't talk much about him, I just live. We live. Some days we just exist, and that's okay too. This was good for me today, even if no one gets it. I didn't know I needed to put all of this into words today, but I did. So, yeah, thanks. Edited for update. Wow, thanks. I did not expect such a tremendous response. I'm admittedly a Reddit neophyte. I only recently started reading more and subbing more because things on Reddit were making me laugh and feel happy on days when there wasn't a lot to make me laugh or be super stoked about. I had to Google and then ask my husband what certain things meant because I'm an old and would like someone to come program my VCR whilst I yell at the kids to get off my gosh dang lawn. But in all seriousness, thank you. I have read every response so far and tried to respond to messages and show my appreciation as much as possible. I still have quite a few more to go, but I'm cleaning while the tank naps and trying to plan the rest of our day. We live in such a weird world. I'm guilty of not understanding of what others may be going through that I cannot see. I think we are all like that at times. But yeah, be kind and stuff, because you don't know what other people are going through at first, or even at a second glance. Thanks, folks. A lot. Story 2. This will probably get buried, but there aren't many real responses, so I found out during my last pregnancy that my daughter had a severe form of Turner syndrome. She would be born with a heart defect, a kidney defect, and would have been mentally challenged amongst a list of other things. I was against abortion and wanted to let life play out, so we decided to go through with the pregnancy despite numerous doctors warning us that our daughter would have a terribly tough life. She ended up stillborn at 25 weeks. After seeing her, I felt absolutely ashamed. It was so abundantly clear that she was not built for this world. Had she survived, her every moment would have been suffering, all while waiting for transplants and procedures, just so she could keep suffering. All of that, just so that I could feel better about my choice not to make a hard choice while I was pregnant. I'm pregnant again now. I have agreed with my husband that if the same thing happened again, we will abort. It's easy not to do something like have an abortion, but once that child is born, you and the child don't get a choice. The medical system will do whatever it takes to keep them alive, including prolonging their suffering. I should have stopped her suffering the moment I had the chance. That is the truly noble decision, and is way less selfish than allowing my child to suffer just for my own pride. I'm so thankful that she died. Story 3. My 9-year-old has autism, and we were told he would never even talk, let alone do all the social things other kids do. We had his birthday party yesterday, and while you'd think he's only 5 or 6 when he talks. Not only that, he socializes. He's awkward as F about it and tends to just turn tail and wander off when he suddenly needs a break from everything and people, but he does interact. When he was first diagnosed, I'll admit that yes, I had some regret. I felt like an awful mother for it, too. Then came to terms with the fact that my feelings were normal and I needed to get used to him and everything required for his disability, including therapy 5 days a week, 45 minutes away in another city. It took time, but now, no, I do not regret it or him. I've learned to take things as they come and cherish all of the milestones my son achieves. After all, they were things everyone said he'd never do. Edit. Leaving work now, so if I can't reply to you, I'm sorry, but I wanted to say thank you so much to everyone that's replied to me so far. You've all been so supportive when I was honestly scared I'd get ripped apart for admitting the way I felt when G was diagnosed, and also for telling about how I was in denial about his symptoms for over 6 months before I said, okay, he needs to see the doctor. Thank you to everyone for being wonderful, supportive people that understand how hard it can be for a parent with a disabled child, and that we're all just human, not perfect. Story 4. Father of an 11-year-old son on the spectrum with severe ADHD and IED. He's funny as crap and the most loving person on the planet. More than that, he's his own person, no matter what. Wearing boots with shorts? Doesn't give an F because he wanted to wear both. Hat pulled down so far it makes his ears stick out? That's how he likes it. He's honestly made me reevaluate my own social stigmas and hangups. All of that said, he's the reason we stopped at 2 kids. My wife had severe depression during pregnancy, and the safe antidepressant that she was on is now linked to autism. So there's that aspect of it too. Edit. It was Prozac that she was on. I'm on mobile and also an idiot. So I can't link the article, but if you Google Prozac linked to autism, several articles come up. Edit 2. The link between the medication and the autism simply adds another layer to the what if game. I'm not looking to place blame or even get compensation or anything. I think they simply didn't know back then. Also, it's not a definite cause. Also, IED, intermittent explosive disorder. More or less, that means he doesn't get a little upset about something, he has a complete meltdown. He doesn't get a little happy about something, he has the best day of his life several times a day. Third and probably final edit, my son is very high functioning. He leads a very normal life. He's just a little quirky. Parenting is hard regardless of what your children need, and his mom and I have made plenty of mistakes. I do not regret having him with even the autism. My biggest worry or concern is how he'll manage living on his own. He's very much like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. If we tell him not to run, he starts skipping. He often enforces rules that he has no business enforcing, correcting other people's children, or even telling adults that something isn't allowed. It's never a dull moment with that kid, that's for sure. Story 5. I regret having my 9-year-old with autism and oppositional defiance disorder every single day. I don't care if I get downvoted to heck either. She is very verbal and can be as sweet as a peach when she gets her way. But doing the hard work of parenting her correctly has been a nightmare. She was an unwanted pregnancy when I was a dumb 20-year-old. I was in a lot of psych meds before I realized I was pregnant that I think messed her brain up. I had taken Plan B perfectly, like on the instructions. The one time I had unprotected relations, I figured it wouldn't have been the end of that worry. I didn't realize I was pregnant until she was about 10 weeks gestation and immediately stopped taking my meds, but alas, by the time I could get the money together for an abortion, the closest Planned Parenthood was a 7-hour drive, so not doing that. The pregnancy was too far along. I wish I would have looked into adoption now. Bio dad has never been in the picture, and the first 5 years were pretty rough, but manageable, since I had family help and a super supportive husband. Once she started kindergarten, she was getting suspended from school constantly for stupid crap like throwing an empty water bottle at the principal or hitting her teacher. Her IEP was essentially worthless, and I couldn't hold down a job or go to school because I had no one to watch her every single week at random times. I'd get called to take her home for 2 to 3 days at a time. So I did what I thought was best, and we packed up and moved out of the state with her to a much more supportive area with better schools. We have been there for 3 years, and it's been a nightmare. Her professional supports, school, in-home therapist, the community have all been outstanding, but I have no support for myself besides my husband, and we are moving back to our home state in 3 weeks because I'm becoming too ill myself from all of this. She bites, kicks, screams, runs away into traffic, calls us grotesque names when she doesn't get her way. Wednesday, I had to call the police because she refused to get in the car when it was time to go home. And when I was finally able to literally drag her kicking and biting 70-pound butt into the car and close it, she tried to break the window open. She took an ambulance ride to the hospital and was a little angel for them when she calmed down. And they said she wasn't a threat and sent her right home. I am very bitter and resentful. I've done everything I can for her to give her a good life. She has in-home specialists come to teach her coping skills 5 hours every week. She is in one of the best school districts in Pennsylvania. I pay for acting and swimming classes for her, but when I sit down and have to discipline her or make her do her homework, I get verbally and physically abused. And there's only so much one person can take when you give and you give and you give and you get nothing in return. I feel guilty because her baby brother is neurotypical and we have a very strong bond. I love him more, but I'm becoming more apathetic every day to my toxic feelings towards my daughter. Almost always I hope that when we move back home that she gets arrested and ends up in jail or something, so she can see how good she has it. That way I can take a break from her. Story 6. Probably late to the party, but it's my story to tell and sometimes I need to say it. I don't have one, I have 3. All 3 are special needs, 2 on disability, and the third isn't because we weren't able to get her to cooperate. Regret? Only in so much that I regret that I'm their father, and probably am responsible for effing them on a genetic level. I love them because they are of me. Would I do it again? No, I'm not strong enough. The only reason I haven't unalived myself is because it doesn't feel right to put my responsibility onto someone else. And if I don't take care of them, who will? I need to be the last to die so I can watch over them. I'm drowning even though they are no longer small kids. There are barely services in the rural South, and I don't have the time or the time off to travel an hour plus one way to try and find a counselor for me. I'll be a rock. I'll make it. Just some days. F man. Story 7. Throwaway for obvious reasons. I had rubella, German measles, in the first trimester of my pregnancy. As a result, my son was born deaf, with ADHD and is probably on the spectrum, although they didn't diagnose it often back in the 70s. As he grew older, I realized that he was probably a sociopath as well, although that wasn't diagnosed either. I started doing my own research and realized that I had a child with massive problems and impossible behaviors that no one but me and his school system recognized. Unfortunately, they decided that I was making him have the problems, so there was no help there. I did everything possible to teach him, well, anything, but he never cared to learn. He was horrible to animals, except for his cat, until he realized that it wasn't good for his own health to act on his impulses. Yes, I beat my kid. Not badly, but it had to hurt or it was ignored. Switches that stung worked pretty well. I didn't want to hurt him, I just wanted him to understand that behaviors have consequences. He refused to learn the sign. The Helen Keller thing did not work for him, so he had no language aside from pointing and typical facial expressions and gestures. I had a husband who was an over-the-road trucker and never home, and a mother who refused to take care of herself physically and expected me to do it all. So many stories. At any rate, when he was 10, I divorced my husband and told him that he had to take custody. He thought I was the problem anyway and did love his kid, or at least thought he did. He found out pretty fast that the behaviors I described weren't my imagination. When a string of babysitters quit, he married and moved across the country. Yay for not having to deal with it anymore. I met someone and put myself back together, went to college and got a degree. One day, about 10 years after the divorce, I got the idiot idea to check up on the kid. I got the stepmom on the phone. She said God knows what to him. He wanted to come and visit in a few days. When I said that was impossible due to work and that I needed a week to arrange some time off or something, he apparently literally destroyed his room and beat up the neighbor. She told me never to contact them again. No problem. I changed my name and I never tried him again. It's been 30 years and I did a Google search for him. He's in prison doing 15 to life for essaying a child. She was 11. He's 6'6" and a monster. I hope someone shoves a shiv into him so that he never gets out. I work with disabled children and loved them all. I would have given anything for him to have been anything different. It's hard to take care of paralyzed children, but dealing with one so mentally effed is impossible. God help any of you who have to do it. You have my greatest respect. Story 8. My son is 9 and nonverbal and moderately autistic. He is an incredibly warm and friendly soul, and we love him and have done everything for him. My wife basically gave up her career to be home and take care of him, and I took myself off the corporate track so I could be home more with him. We live in New York City, away from our families because nowhere else in the country can he get the services and support that he can get here. When you have teachers protesting because of teaching out of the decade-old books, the schooling and accommodation for a disabled child is practically non-existent. H is a 2-parent child. Words have no meaning to him, and the only interactions you have with him are requests, hugs, or being hit. He will speak in about 3-word sentences, and most of them are rote that he has known since he was 3. Imagine a child who has the language skills of maybe a 15-month-old, and that's where they are at 9 years old. Trying to find out what he means or says is a daily struggle. There are some words we know and can give him what he wants. However, he uses labels such as orange or duck and expects you to help him find it. Again, words have no meaning, so he gets frustrated, and so do we. My wife and I wake up every morning to the fact that every other moment our friends pre-age, as you only make friends with parents of other disabled children afterwards. Another post is completely foreign. We will be retiring for 3 as H will never leave the house, never go to college, never bring his fiance home to meet us, and never bring grandkids over for us to visit. Finally, we live with the absolute fear that once we are gone, who will love him and take care of him? Will he even understand that we have died and just keep begging for mommy or keep saying daddy is home soon? Daddy will be home soon? Yeah, that's our lives, and that's what we have to look forward to. To answer your question, based on the knowledge I had at the time prior to my wife getting pregnant, I would not change a thing. We were so incredibly happy and hopeful. That time prior to age 1 was magical, and we had so much hope. That said, if I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't have brought him into this world. His frustration is real and grows every day. He's in the 95th percent for height and weight, so I'm getting to where I can't physically handle him the way I need to. Our frustration and sense of hopelessness continues to grow, and to be very frank, there are large swaths of this country that do not give a crap about him, and I am incredibly fearful of what will happen once we leave this earth, and he is here all alone. So no, if I knew then what I know now, H wouldn't be here, and that's the sorriest thing in the world to say, and I hate myself for even thinking it. Story 9. I have a son who was born with multiple problems. No official name for what it was, but chief among them is a congenital heart defect. After he was born, we spent a month going back and forth to the NICU in the hospital. We had 2 other kids at home, so we couldn't just move in like some other parents. When he was released from the hospital, he came home on oxygen, a feeding tube, a physical therapy schedule, and so much medication that one of us was up with him every 2 hours. Nobody in the house was getting sleep. The dogs were relegated to living outside, except when we were home, because they decided the oxygen line looked like something to chew on. Don't feel bad for the dogs. Getting the baby out of the house during that time was such a chore that I hardly left anymore. Aside from his many doctor's appointments all across town, I was pretty much just around to care for him. I had a ton of friends who helped. My regular D&D group moved mountains for us. They started coming over to watch the older kids, even learned the baby's schedule. These were already good friends, but in those months, they became family. Anyway, my son died when he was about 3 months old. I wasn't home. Another friend had dragged me out for shopping. My husband knows infant CPR through his work, and he tried. The ambulance arrived quickly. They tried, but in the end, well, there was just too much wrong with his little body. If you ask if I regret it, I'm not sure. I waffle on that question. I remember days when I was so tired that I'd function only during feeding and medication times. But I also remember days where I was holding him, and everything in the world felt right. Like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. I will say, the night after my son died, I slept a full 10 hours of deep, uninterrupted sleep for the first time in 3 months, and it was the best sleep I'd ever gotten. Story 10. I have a 3-year-old with Down syndrome. We found out about 18 weeks into utero when the ultrasound showed a severe heart defect that would need to be surgically corrected 3 months after birth. She had a twin who didn't make it. Amniocentesis confirmed the genetics the OB suspected. At the time, my wife and I, a lot going on in our personal lives, major life transition type stuff, building a home, purchasing a business, pregnant with twins, and all the bad news came extremely fast and left us basically shell-shocked. We stayed up talking and crying for a couple weeks, ultimately making the decision to give the kid a chance and knowing that if she wound up nonverbal, paralyzed, eating through a tube with zero quality of life, that whatever quality of life she had, or lack thereof, would basically be our fault for pushing through a pregnancy that had all the warning signs of this could end badly. We are 3 years into this now. I'm telling you, this girl is the gosh dang light of my life. She spreads joy everywhere she goes. She waves and blows kisses at strangers. She gives hugs for no particular reason. Everywhere we go, people remember her. She's walking and running, knows more sign language than I do, and picking up words left and right. She did have her heart surgery at 3 months old. The defect was corrected. The surgeon saved both our lives. I think in a lot of ways, parents hope their kids are going to be stronger in areas of their lives where they are weak. I'm pretty introverted and awkward. I feel like most of my life I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop, and when we found out about her, it felt like this was it. I was mostly angry that the shoe dropped on my kid, but now I see how much joy she brings to others, how she has no reservations when walking into a group of kids she doesn't know, how her default mode is happy, and how it spreads to others so quickly. Biggest things that have changed: our life plan is no longer to get the kids to 18 and then we're free. Our plan is that we're a family together, and she'll probably be living with us her entire life, and we have to be okay with that. That took a little adjustment, but honestly, at this point, that feels like a blessing instead of a curse. The other big adjustment is the idea that one of these days, if we don't take care of ourselves and plan accordingly, she's going to be alone with only the state and any surviving relatives to help her out. They say one of the greatest tragedies is when a parent outlives their child. When I think about my future, that is actually the goal here. I'm going to do everything I can to take care of myself and my estate so that my beautiful girl has me around as long as she needs me. It's my honor and it's my blessing to do that for her. And hopefully shortly after she puts down her burdens and I'll be able to put down mine and be satisfied with the lives we had led. Story 11. My former partner had a heavily disabled kid. He was in his late teens when I knew him and was a horrible burden on her life. He had so many problems. The most obvious and hard to deal with was a total lack of situational understanding or decency. So sometimes he'd just get an impulse and follow through with it. Whether that meant pushing stuff onto the floor, throwing it, breaking it, biting it, or whatever. So obviously he needed constant supervision, which was hard in itself because a lot of the time he'd be doing gross and pervy stuff, not just constantly getting his junk out and playing with himself, but weird stuff like peeing into his hands and splashing it everywhere, and over on people. So obviously no one wanted to be near him or really inside of him, and she pretty much ended up just never going out and spending most of her life dedicated to this absolutely useless, aggressive, disgusting son of hers. To my shame, I couldn't put up with it. Big problem was if he called out for his mom and she didn't come, he'd start acting up and screaming. So even if I only went around there late evening when he was in bed, we'd lock the door to her room. It was hard to enjoy ourselves because she'd have to get up and put some clothes on and rush to see what he needed, and often it'd be something that totally killed the mood. Like one time she came back with this horrified look on her face and said, "Sorry, I need to get him in the shower. He's been rubbing poop on himself again." I'm not a big fan of this one. I know I'm supposed to inject comments here and there, but it's hard to relate to a lot of these stories. I'm not a parent. I don't have any kids with any sort of neurodisorders. But this, he's just dating the girl. You can't talk bad about someone else's kid. I don't care if he killed the mood. To call someone else's child disgusting and absolutely useless? Get out of here. Story 12. My daughter with Otohara syndrome would have faced a life of 24/7 dependent care for however long she could have lived on a ventilator or feeding tube. This syndrome presents with no possibility of normal brain function from birth. Upon hearing that, my husband and I decided to take her home from the NICU and let her pass with palliative care. We had no interest in keeping her body alive if there was no chance of consciousness. She lived a total of 16 days. Had we gotten a more gray area diagnosis with at least some hope for some kind of life but severe disability, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Just maintenance of the feeding tube was too much for me to handle, emotionally, especially since we have a healthy son. It would have torpedoed our lives and his. I feel devastated to have lost her, but also extremely grateful that her prognosis was so severe. The decision was basically made for us. Unfortunately, they did not find the causative gene, so there's nothing we can test for in future pregnancies. That's the scariest thing. Unless you know what rare genetic abnormality you're looking for, your basic NIPT test, amino or CVS, will only look for the big issues. But rare genetic syndromes can be extremely severe, and basic prenatal tests don't pick them up unless you know what gene variant you're looking for. And even then, there's no guarantee the baby won't have something else wrong with it. My brain-dead daughter passed all her prenatal screenings with flying colors and was even sent home from the hospital a healthy baby who passed her infant hearing test. We're at a medically excellent institution. It just goes to show that rare genetic disorders can't always be tested for or diagnosed accurately. Story 13. I'm always late to the ones I can comment on. Here it goes anyway. My son's journey started at 3. He was kicked out of a private preschool. I just thought he needed extra help. Nope. Evaluations through school followed. He got a school diagnosis of ASD. His medical diagnosis of ASD, ADHD, conduct disorder, speech and language disorder, and unspecified emotional and behavior disorders followed. We are still trying to get him to the right therapies. During all of the above, my oldest daughter had her first psychotic break at 8 years old. I had been fighting with her school about the physical bullying that was occurring, but they wouldn't hear it. Well, she broke, ended up in the ER, and then fast-tracked into emergent psychiatry care. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia, PTSD, MDD with psychotic features, and ADD. She spent almost this entire month in a mental hospital. She's so much different than before, so flat. They are medically complicated and I love them, but this is so hard. I'm only 32. I'm overwhelmed and sometimes wish I didn't have any children, but I do, so I will keep on keeping on. Story 14. I have a 17-year-old with severe autism. He is nonverbal and cannot do anything on his own. I have been raising him myself with help of parents since 2 years old as his biological mother abandoned him. It has been tough raising him. Raising him when he was a child wasn't so bad. He was this laughing bundle of joy. People were more understanding of his disability and his inability to talk because, well, he was just this cute little kid. Now that he has gone through puberty, it's like everything has changed. I'm not really sure I can describe the experience I've had with him transitioning from a child to an adult. Him using minced garlic to try and pleasure himself on the couch was an interesting experience. The added hormones of a teenager along with the autism is something you don't often think about. As he gets into his 20s and becomes more of an adult, I see further problems. There aren't as many programs available the older you get. We have to start worrying about what he is going to do post-school. Getting a job at his functional level is pretty much out of the question. Overall, though, I find myself lucky. I managed somehow to find a wonderful woman who accepts him and is willing to go through all the challenges with me. Her son, who now calls me dad, has been equally challenged by severe autistic stepbrothers, but he has done remarkable in his part. I absolutely have regrets, and if I could change things somehow, I would, but I can't, so I keep going through with what I have. Story 15. No, my son has a brain tumor. He's had one since he was a baby, and he's now 9. It's a slow-growing one in his hypothalamus, and as such can't be removed. It caused him to not think he was hungry. He was starving himself as a baby. He's had to have 3 rounds of chemo. At 7, he started puberty. He has an implant similar to Norplant that keeps him from having puberty. It needs to be replaced every year. Insurance is a nightmare. It was fine for a long time, but this past year has been the absolute worst. Luckily, we live near one of the best children's hospitals. They're amazing. Sometimes, even after years, I'll start crying at work. Sure, he's not on chemo anymore, but it feels like it's best to let it go now instead of when he's on chemo. He's so funny. After the pain of even touching anyone finally subsided and the Pavlovian response from touching subsided, which took longer, he's now also very loving and huggy. He'll still fly into rages at times, but more often he'll hide if he doesn't want to do something. I can't punish him either. What can I do to him that he hasn't already endured 1,000 times? Take away his stuff? Sure, but this kid can sit there for an hour with nothing but his imagination. He does it in the MRI, of which he does every 3 to 6 months. Withhold affection? In the past few months is the first he's actually wanted to ever touch another human being for more than a couple seconds. Get mad at him? His little body has been racked with pain so severe it has felt like everything is on fire. He's had episodes where his limbs felt like steel and he can't form words. What's a little anger? Another parent here said that it has made her a stronger, better person. And I agree. Problems seem so insignificant faced with this. Like creditors are all, your credit score will go down. And I'm like, oh no. Click. We have a special goodnight kiss, TT nose, fist bump, supernova explosion with sound effects. My daughter and I have one too. It's a kiss, kiss, butterfly, kiss, finger, waggle, hug for 30 seconds. Every problem is swept away by this. Because all you have is this moment. Maybe I'll do another one later. Now is better. Story 16. I struggle. Sometimes I think to myself, yes, absolutely, I regret it, but I don't hate him, and I don't ever try to make him feel like he is a problem. It is very difficult. When I had my son, we had issues with the birthing process, followed by people refusing to help. Issues with latching, more people refusing to offer any help or emotional support. My entire family being overseas, except for my useless in-laws, who my MIL cried when someone called her grandma, if that doesn't say it all. We had her watch him when he was 3 months old after constant colic, crying all night, no sleep, and had her refer to him as a brat. So that's also really nice. I had a community nurse tell me that I think something is wrong with him when he was sliding his mouth along the baby gate we had at the time. My son has autism with a global developmental delay, also has ADHD, undiagnosed and unmedicated, because it's too controversial as it is apparently. Not that it would help him tenfold. He is getting better and understanding more. However, we did find poo next to his bed the other day and was told it wasn't him. He probably has the mentality of an 8-year-old, but he's around 11, so acts like a teenager. It's a fine balance. Honestly, I struggle on a daily basis. I don't even know the last time we got away from him. I know if someone was willing to help babysit once in a while so my husband and I could reconnect, it would be amazing, but no one wants to lift a finger. It's a very hopeless feeling. Edit. Also, I hate when people tell me, oh, he doesn't look like he has autism because he has half-decent social skills. That is because of the early intervention that my husband and I did when he was younger. But he does have autism. He does have a delay. It won't go away over time. Telling me this does not help at all. Story 17. Not the parent, but the sibling. My sister was born with birth defects. I was only 12 or 13 when she was born, so I did not know what the doctors told them. She was born with a cleft lip and palate, which could be repaired with surgeries. She was also born with shallow hip sockets, which would make it difficult for her to walk without physical therapy. When I got older, I heard a lot of terms which was the cause of many of her issues. Most people would just assume it is only difficult for the parents. They rarely consider what this sibling has to go through. Before my sister was born, I took part in after-school clubs and spent time with friends on the weekends. That came to an end when my sister was born because my mom needed me to help around the house. Let us fast forward a bit. When I was 15, my sister needed to go have surgery in Atlanta to repair her cleft lip and palate. She stops breathing on the operating table, but they resuscitate her. However, there is brain damage. She is pretty much bedridden as a result. She is put on more meds and has a track installed. My responsibilities around the house now increase. Fast forward a bit, I graduate high school and start college in a few months. I talk to my parents and try to talk them into getting a nurse to help out since I'm going to be gone. Because my mom has mental issues, undiagnosed, but they do run on her side of the family. She doesn't want to get one. She thinks she can take care of her all by herself. After a few accidents while in college, my mom ends up finding a full-time job and my dad starts working part-time at his, with him becoming the main caregiver. Fast forward once more, my dad is hospitalized and I am led to believe he may die. So I go back home. However, because my mom is effed in the head, she only called me down to look after my sister while she stayed at the hospital. My house had no internet, so I could not do my college work as a result. I missed 2 weeks of school because of this. I try to appeal to get myself removed from one of my courses, but the request is denied. I fail the class and lose a major scholarship. About a year later, I had to move back home. Since I lived in the middle of nowhere, work was hard to find without a 30-minute commute. We talk and I agree to become my sister's full-time caregiver while I do college online. My sister eventually passed 5 years later due to her health complications. In all honesty, I believe that she lived for as long as she did because of the care I gave her. Doctors gave a low life expectancy for her after she was resuscitated, and it was even low before that. But as a result of all of this, I don't want to have kids. I spent almost a decade changing diapers and calming her to when she was crying. Story 18. I was 17 when my baby was born, and it took me very long to have his DiGeorge's diagnosed, and in between there was extensive stress as the symptoms played out and seemed like one traumatic event after another. I have no regrets about having him in the sense that I would not undo it. When people ask me this question, or variations of it, I normally say, if I could go back and organize for him to have been born in perfect health, but still be the exact same child, of course I would. If I could go back and postpone having a child for several years, but still have the same exact child, I would. I am blessed beyond belief that his disability has not yet had implications for him in terms of learning or mental health, although his syndrome does increase the chance of him developing schizophrenia as an adult. But the continual trauma of medical complications and the associated recoveries from his various illnesses and surgeries are exhausting. As he gets older, many symptoms are more appropriately managed. We know more about what to do and what to expect, and less new things are manifesting. So it has become easier to say. However, now we are entering a delicate time where he has to process and come to terms with his limitations. What hurts more, watching your baby nearly die as an infant, intubated and comatose in ICU as an 8-year-old, or crying as a 14-year-old because he has realized he can't do certain professions and will always have to be managing his health, and he didn't ask to be born this way. It isn't fair. The answer, of course, is D, all of the above. Any parent of a disabled child will tell you it is a constant and fascinating array of new, piercing pain on the regular. Never easier as they age, it's just different fears and different struggles. So no regret, per se. Do I wonder what it would have been like to not be a teenage single mother? Of course. Or to have been a mother of a healthy child? Of course. But there's nothing I wouldn't do to love and protect my baby. So I would never undo anything about what brought this particular human into my life. Story 19. My 13-year-old son has autism, ADHD, OCD, depression, and anxiety. He's also whip smart. He's one of those smart kids who knows he's smart, so he's lazy as F and can be a complete jerk. When his medicines work, he's pretty good, but sometimes they don't, and he's a complete crap hat and hard to be around. It also doesn't help that we have zero in common personality-wise, so we are both quite alien to each other, which makes us clash a bit. He's a lot more like his dad, so they get along better. Though recently we've gotten a Switch in Breath of the Wild, and that's helped us bond a bit. I had my son when I was 20. Because of the challenges we faced with him, we chose to not have any more children. There are many times that I've regretted having him, especially pre-medication. I tell my friend privately that I'm a child-free woman who just happens to have a kid. I think maybe things would have been different if I had bonded to him in the womb or when he was a baby, but I never had that instant attachment most mothers have. When he was born and they handed him to me, he felt like a stranger, and that feeling never quite went away. I make do and do my best and have my fingers crossed that in 5 more years, he'll be a functioning member of society and go to college. Story 20. This will probably be buried, but I am not the parent or sibling. I am the disabled child. I have high-functioning autism, ADD, and depression and anxiety that honestly stem from having the former 2 conditions. I am also in my early 20s and a girl, which is significant because I didn't present my symptoms the same as boys, and thus went my whole childhood and adolescence undiagnosed. My family and myself all felt that I was lazy or just bad at being a human being, as well as just snobby, standoffish, socially awkward. So getting actual reasons for my deficiencies was a relief. I'm very intelligent, can live independently, though I'm very disorganized because I get overwhelmed easily. I can feed and toilet myself. I'm even going to graduate school in the fall. However, I do have more parental help than most adults my age would usually get. Honestly, I think my parents regret me. Maybe this is my own insecurity, though. I don't think I'm the daughter my mother wanted. My dad cried once at the thought that I'd never live on my own and worries about me being able to get health insurance when I'm 26. The parents posting in this thread, I pity them and feel sorry for them, but they also make me feel sad and feel more acutely that I am a burden. The only thing I can hope for is to make it up to my parents by becoming completely independent in my chosen career and then supporting them. Story 21. Yes, but it hurts to stop and think about it that way. Everything we do is with him in mind. Everything is battle and finding and getting therapy, fighting with insurance, rearranging our lives around medical and therapy needs. But the little battles are what eat away at you. Arranging and dealing with the special needs school bus, getting basic medical attention from qualified providers who understand his limitations, constant vigilance at the park so he doesn't hurt himself or get bullied, those notes home from school because he's had an outburst or gotten hurt again, the dream job my husband turned down because they don't have a school for him there, me not walking to graduation because he can't go, not being able to hire a babysitter for a date night because someone qualified is just too expensive, losing touch with all your friends with non-disabled kids as their lives diverge, the days when we can't even leave the house because the world is too loud or cold or scary. It's finding out disabilities and diagnoses and degrees and crossing that threshold of knowing it would be irresponsible to have more children, then having to tell people you just only wanted one because everyone thinks you're cruel and maybe the next one will be normal. So yes, if I knew then what I know now, I'd have never decided to have a baby. I don't love him any less and I'll fight until my dying breath for him, but I wish I didn't have to. Story 22. It's my little sister, but I've talked with my mom on one subject. Short answer, yes. My little sister has something called Rett syndrome. The scariest thing about it could be the fact that every woman in the planet has a 1 in 50,000 chance of having a Rett child, which you think that's not that much, but it's every single woman. You only see Rett in girls. Why, you ask? Because it kills every boy that has it by the age of 3, unless he has an extra X chromosome, so XXY. That's also the age where things tend to go to crap for girls. They develop normally for the first 3-ish years, then slowly but steadily lose all of their learned skills, walking, talking, sometimes eating, sometimes breathing. It's not very pretty. As for my brother and myself, she loves my sister, absolutely loves her, even if sometimes she'd like to throw her out a window. But to do it over again, she'd have ended the pregnancy early. In fact, she got every genetic test on the planet done for my little brother, and would have ended that one if something came up negative. Basically, my sister had brought a lot of light into our lives, but the strain has been great to bear. And the kicker? We asked my sister a similar question. She said she'd rather not have been born at all if she had to be born with Rett. Story 23. As a sister of someone with a learning disability, I've watched parents struggle. I've watched the stigma of raising a child with his conditions. I've watched and cried at night from sheer exhaustion from caring. He's 30 and will never leave home. My mom has her own chronic health issues that are never going to stand a chance of improving because she's always caring. Up in the middle of the night to look after him, change his sheets, comfort him when he can't breathe or has nightmares. It's been one of the things that we've seriously discussed over the last few months now. We're at the stage when we should be considering kids of our own. Apart from my own health problems, this is one of those things that has had a massive say in our decision not to. Now, I love my brother more than anything, but I couldn't have kids knowing what I know know from watching my parents. Too much could go wrong, and my health is bad enough already. Story 24. I lived with a mother of 3 disabled children for half a year and continued to babysit the youngest child for another year. Life is really hard for her, especially because her husband left her after the 3rd child was born. The first one was born blind with autistic syndromes, and second and third have severe Down syndrome. Both of them can't talk, they can only scream. The second child looks really young for his age and can barely walk. I gotta admit that I didn't like the mother because she is the "I don't believe in modern medicine, vaccines are bad, and my age doesn't have anything to do with it" kind of person. She was 41 when she gave birth to her youngest kid, but man, she never regretted having her children and loved and cared for them deeply. And you could see it. She doesn't have any time left for herself. She has almost no one she can depend on because most of her friends left her. And to top it all, her ex is trying to get her house and all her stuff and doesn't care at all about the children. She also strongly believes in her children. Always said to me how her oldest is going to be a great church musician one day. Despite being blind, he is a great organist. And how bright her youngest child actually is. She believes the girl can understand us very well, even though I couldn't see it at all. So while I'm not the biggest fan of the mother, I gotta admit, she is one strong and amazing woman for doing all that. Story 25. I am a father of a disabled girl who has a rare chromosomal abnormality. We were devastated when we heard of her defects, but abortion never crossed my or my missus' mind. Obviously, it all depends on the defects your child has. Learning to readjust my expectations has been the hardest part. While children born months after my daughter were learning to stand and walk, she was still learning to crawl. She is 7 now, and I have no regrets. Everyone wishes their child to be happy and healthy, and my daughter is happy in her life. This question reminded me of a post I read about finding out your child has a disability. I've posted it below. I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." "Holland?" you say. "What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy." But there's a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out. You must buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while, and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy and coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, "Yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned." And the pain of that will never, ever, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is still a very, very real, significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special and very lovely things about Holland. What a beautiful sentiment. Again, maybe I have no right to say, but I really like that perspective of it's not wrong, it's different. That's cool. Story 26. I might be too late, but this is something I actually really want to talk about. First things first, not a parent, but dad ran out 17 years ago and mom got a job 6 hours away, so for a lack of a better term, I am my brother's caretaker. He has an intellectual disability, and while he was diagnosed with ADHD in his teenage years, we all suspect he was misdiagnosed there. His condition is mild, admittedly, but that does not change that it affects him greatly. My brother is 32, going on 33. He was born 3 months premature, and that came with a plethora of problems. While he is mostly physically healthy today, that certainly wasn't the case for the first 15 years of his life. My parents had me for the specific reason of taking care of my brother. Maybe I was backup for if something happened to them, or maybe they suspected that eventually they'd want to leave, and they would feel less guilty if they knew someone would still be there for him. And I have been. He can't work, but he refuses to seek any aid. It hasn't been easy. I resent my parents for having me just to take care of him, but I would never resent him for it. He is my best friend. My life would be lesser without him. and he has accomplished so much. He may have graduated high school at 20, but you know what? He effing did it. It took him 20 tries at least to pass the written driver's test, but he effing did it. Passed behind the wheel on his first try, too. And it took him 6 years to finish community college, but he effing did it. And I'm so happy I could be there for him for all of those moments. This may be disappointing to conclude with, but I don't necessarily want kids. If they happen, great. If not, that's okay too. The only way my brother factors into that decision is that I just would not want my children to struggle the way he has, because he has been through the ringer. But if they had his passion, his willpower, and his creative soul, then they would be some pretty dang awesome kids. Story 27. I'm a dad of a 6-year-old who was diagnosed with autism 2 years ago. I don't regret it for a second. He's opened my eyes to so much that I'd otherwise never experience. It's hard to explain to someone how it is unless they are in the same position. I get questions a lot asking, what's it like? And I can't answer a lot because autism is broad as well. He wakes up every single day with a smile on his face, ready for the day. And I know he is scared of the obstacles he faces, especially at school. Still though, he's happy. It's hard for him to communicate. It's a lot of repeating words, but kindergarten is teaching him a lot of new techniques. He's great with colors, numbers, and shapes, but always struggled expressing his needs and wants in an acceptable manner. The other day, though, for Easter, he got a basket with bubbles, and for the first time he said, I like bubbles. That was the first time he said he actually liked something. He used his feelings and put it into words. Experiences like that make it so much more worth it. Thank you for your question, and I hope people can see this. Story 28. I have an 8-year-old son with autism. He's completely nonverbal, speaks with very limited sign language, attends special education classes, and requires 24/7 one-on-one supervision. At school, there's always a teacher or aide assigned directly to supervise him, even on the bus. I think the worst thing has been the damage it's caused on the relationship with my ex or his mother. She's diagnosed with BPD and has a very difficult time being around him as he causes her a great deal of stress. She left me a couple of years ago and now only watches him while I'm at work, and I work third shift for this schedule to work, meaning she basically picks him up and puts him to bed. This means pretty much all of my free time is spent watching my son. I don't really get to go out. I've given up on everything, trying to look for another relationship, and he can be very stressful to watch. He needs help with basic things like going to the bathroom and getting dressed. It's slowly been wearing me down, and I've been feeling more and more depressed and overwhelmed as time goes on. I love him, and he's the most important thing in my life, but the answer to this question is definitely yes. I'd be living a much different life if I had never had my son. Story 29. My daughter was born with Zellweger syndrome. It's a severe, rare genetic condition that we didn't know we carried. What this means is my daughter will die before she is 1, maybe even before she is 6 months. Because of her disorder, she basically has half a brain. She can't even feed like a normal baby. She has a tube in her stomach that we feed her through. Part of her disorder includes epilepsy. She will have anywhere from 5 to 20 seizures a day if her meds aren't working anymore. My daughter is 9 weeks old and on some of the most lethal drugs out there just to keep her comfortable. I won't lie to you, it's so hard. We have nursing care 12 hours a day, and she will never develop beyond a newborn. She is that mentally handicapped. She will never sit on her own. She will never crawl, talk, or really anything besides exist. Is it hard? Yes, every day is heartbreaking and a challenge. Waiting on the train to finally crash really sucks. But do I regret it? No. My daughter has made me the strongest person ever. I'm 24 years old. Having to think about DNRs and if we would intubate is not something a 24-year-old should have to think about. But she's here to teach me something and to make a difference in my life. And she already has. Her doctors love her so much. She's like a little celebrity. I don't regret her. We sing to her and we talk to her and we play music for her. She is blind but can hear, and she does love music so much. We take her for walks because she loves the wind and birds. I know this because she can smile. Would we do this again? Absolutely not. My husband and I want another child, but we will be doing IVF with PGD to make sure this doesn't happen again. We didn't know until she was born something was wrong. If I had known before we tried to conceive, we would have gone straight to IVF. Had I known when she was in the womb, we still would have had her. And that is just my personal choice. I don't regret her, but it's really hard. Knowing your child could die at any moment sucks. Story 30. Probably not as bad as some of the other stories on here, but I donated sperm to a lesbian couple. I'm a gay dude. Didn't expect anything back, but I'm friends with them still, so I still see him and talk to them about his progress. I've wanted to have kids for as long as I can remember, and this was one way to have one, but not actually be mine. He has been diagnosed with severe autism at age 2, going on 3. I don't have to, I guess, deal with it, because they're the ones dealing with it on a daily basis, but he's getting worse. He has no social skills with kids his own age. He started regressing into nonverbal communication even though he knows way too many words and numbers and colors for his age. He picks at his skin on his lips and hands until he bleeds. He hits himself over and over by banging his body or head into stuff. He tries to run into traffic. It's just a lot. He isn't my kid. He lives in another state. He's 100% loved by his parents, and I have a lot of love and care for him. If he was my own kid, I would accept it and deal with it and give him all the love and care that he deserves. But he's not. They get to do all of this. They get to comfort him. They get to help him. They get to take care of him. And that never bothered me until I realized that as much as I want to have one of my own, I shouldn't because of my fear that I'll do that to someone else. So no, I don't regret giving him to them. It just sucks that this was a wake-up call that I will never have a child of my own. Story 31. I regret a lot about life in general, including marriage and kids, though admittedly I'm going through a bit of a midlife crisis. After having one child with mid to low functioning autism now in their teens, and a couple others with difficult mental health and or learning disabilities, yes, I regret categorically, especially on the hard days. As for the one with autism, I resent the fact that they'll always be around. I resent the irrational meltdowns that are sometimes violent, the fact that we can never have a conversation, the obsessions with things that are often embarrassing, irritating, or offensive. I resent having to police their inappropriate behavior, the acting out in public, and the fact that I will never be an empty nester unless I somehow can afford care. Do I wish the disabled child had never been born? Yes. Sometimes I wish I'd never married or had kids at all, or at least until my 30s. I never even really got to try life on my own before marriage, which I jumped into due to religious reasons. Years later, I've lost my faith and am still living on someone else's terms, except now I have commitments that I cannot relinquish. So I'll go on taking care of business, but ultimately, I don't like where my life is at the moment, and I don't see it ever improving. Story 32. Parent here. Don't regret having or caring for my oldest daughter, 9-year-old. Regret the events surrounding her birth, though. Cord wrapped 3 times around her neck, 20 minutes, no oxygen, home birth, malpractice settlement, and I live with that regret. My wife and I boiled it down to when she was a baby and was unclear if she would survive. If she could sit and enjoy the sun on her face, it would be worth caring for her. When it was touch and go, the docs made it clear that there was a way out of her pain, and we really thought about that. Even met with hospice. She just kept improving, and now she's in the 3rd grade doing grade level reading and math and has a great group of friends. She will be in a wheelchair her whole life, and fed with a feeding tube, receive 8 to 10 medications per day, and has multiple rushes to the emergency room for pneumonia and aspiration, and uses a communication device to talk. This will never change. If given a choice between dealing with all of this and not having her, I would take all of this in a heartbeat. If she was not in such good shape now, I might have different feelings. But do I regret not being in a hospital when she was born? Every second of every day. That's the regret I have surrounding my child's care. I'm trying not to ramble and keep things coherent, so I will leave it at that. Also, we have 3 other children, ages 6, 4, and 2. We wanted a big family before any of this, and we stuck to it. It has been the best decision we ever made. Story 33. I have a son that is ADHD, DMDD, and severe anxiety. I am not sure what I would do if given a choice to repeat. His mental illness gives us so much grief. My wife has developed depression, and I am certain PTSD. She is almost a shell of her former self. She gave up working because she has to take care of him now. My oldest son is a saint and hangs with his brother, but takes a lot of verbal abuse, and I am certain it has impacted his life. But he still does good, as a big brother and big brother stuff. Friends don't understand. Our parents don't get it. We are mostly cut off from friends and neighbors out of fear of his behavior. We cannot raise him like a normal child. The techniques most grew up with do not apply. He comes with a whole new set of rules. The thing is, I feel for him. We seek out many treatment options, some I wish we never would have done, but I think we are on the positive side now. The sad thing is he wants to be a normal boy. He wants friends, he wants to go to school, he wants to play sports, he wants to do normal activities of a boy his age. Yet he loses his crap too easy. He loses friends after a couple of months, has been kicked out of every school and sports team, and generally made to feel like a horrible person. When he was in daycare, some of his first sentences were, "Bad baby, not nice." It broke my heart. I cannot tell you how many times I have battles, schools, coaches, teachers trying to get my son what he needs. I have volunteered for more things than I could handle, just to make sure I was involved and make sure he had opportunities. Keep in mind we have had some wonderful people try to help, but they never fully grasp what is going on. He is a teenager now and is homeschooled. He is still very difficult, and he has become almost a shut-in. He's afraid to leave the house because he fears embarrassing himself. I really do not blame those that have turned us away. Many tried very hard, but seeing a child throw a tantrum that is rather uncontrolled is kind of scary. He has been arrested for property damage, kicking holes in doors at school, and he has been to treatment centers and been to many counselors. Now, I think if I had to do it all over again, I would, because I believe in him. There are some truly great things I see. The hard part is that I see who he could have been. I truly believe if he did not have the DMDD, underdeveloped brain, he would have been a very popular kid at school and very successful. These disabilities have taken a toll and it's broken him. We know that eventually this will become either depression or anxiety. I am pretty sure I can see the anxiety part coming out, and I fear for him. My biggest fear his mom and I have is interaction with the police. I see something going wrong in the future with him and jumping and pushing or running from a situation and getting shot. I really hope that's not true, but he does not have a rational brain. I have recently decided to take the long approach. Some kids are independent at 18. He may be 28 before he has normalcy, I hope. Still, we struggle day in and day out with his challenges that no one will ever understand. Story 34. We have a daughter who was born 3 months early. Our little monkey was 810 grams when she was born. She could fit in my hand. She fought some crap in the hospital and fought dang hard. Effing doctors in the neonatal ward told us prems can't feel pain. Miss me with that bullcrap. They didn't remove parents during doctor's rounds for no bloody reason. Anyhow, she didn't come out unscathed. She has mixed hypotonic cerebral palsy. Hypotonia is a low muscle tone. Many people think of muscles as legs, arms, and maybe six-packs, but there are muscles in your intestinal tract. Your tongue is a muscle, and every single one is weaker than normal by a lot. So at 9 years old, she can't walk or toilet herself without help because she lacks the muscle tone required to do the jobs, and she gets dead tired very easily. Mixed cerebral palsy means she has the worst of both worlds. She flaps, head twists. Sometimes I think she's going to snap her own head off, and clenches a lot. The saving grace is that she has such low muscle tone that the contractions don't do much damage. She is also globally developmentally delayed. Globally, but not her ability to understand and absorb information. This is the crapper. People think she is dumb because she can't respond quickly to questions, but she understands everything. And people talk around her as if she can't understand, and this causes little cycles of depression and anger. Thank God she has a temperament of an angel. She is such an amazing little girl, and I love her so much. I am looking at her nap on the couch as I type this. She also has autism. Not super bad, but she shuts down in new situations, or when a lot of people are in an enclosed space. She also needs a lot of time to defrag, which is what we call when she needs to be alone to process stuff. For me, I have no regrets, and I would be lying if I didn't want to change a thing. I would have spared her the pain of everything she goes through every day and just trying to be like all the other kids her age. My wife and I are currently on a world journey with her, giving her an education through visiting and meeting and experiencing the places in history, the animals and environment around us. We will do everything we can to make sure her life is magical, and when we are gone, for her to never have to worry about money and the memory of what we have done with her. Lets her know we are always with her. That is my biggest fear. She will always need carers, and I don't want her to suffer or ever feel alone when we're gone. Tough business, this parenting thing, let me tell you. Story 35. I asked a customer this once. She had a child at the children's hospital that our restaurant was by, and in talking to her and her husband, it's hard. But they didn't regret it. I told them that when I was growing up, I was that ill child, always in and out of hospital, and I always seemed to get ill around exam time. My dad was a university lecturer, and my mom had gone back to her second degree. And although there are times I was so ill I honestly don't remember what was happening to me, and the fact that my parents were there every single day to see me, as well as one of my uncles who has the same condition as me. It's great knowing they're in your corner fighting, even though you can see it on their faces. It's so hard for them to be strong. Because the doctors can't give them good news, they were in tears and I was almost in tears because they were happy to get the perspective of a child who had gone through what they were doing for their child. My parents, after all that, went on to have my little sister. She knew they could have ended up with a second child with my condition, but they did it anyway. My little sister is fine health-wise, but she was always jealous of the attention I received from always being ill. But once she was old enough to understand what was going on, she became a bit more understanding. I don't know how my parents did it, and how they manage now. I still get ill, and even though I'm in a different country, I've had to talk my mom off booking leave and jumping on the first flight to take care of me, even as an adult. I love them for it, and I don't think I could ever repay them for having me and never giving up on me, even when the doctors had. They are my heroes, and an example of what a strong parental figure looks like. Story 36. My aunt had a son with severe physical, behavioral, and learning difficulties. In the first few months, she was so determined to do the best for him. She went through all the usual range of emotions: love, hate, frustration with the world, rage, anger, guilt, etc. Every couple of months, he'd fail to hit a new milestone, and he'd be given a new or extended diagnosis. When you have a kid, you expect a few years of nappies and bottles, but she slowly came to the realization that she'd have the next 60 years of her life as his primary carer. She resolved to carry on. She loved him. How could she not? But the days just kept piling on top of her. The dad was violent and had a restraining order, so no help there. She had to quit her job, and the state income wasn't enough to support them and her other child. It was devastating to watch. Extended family chipped in when we could. My mom became a second parent to the other child. We gave them money for bills, brought them food. I earned my pockets money by cleaning their house every Saturday, but there's only so much you can do. Gradually, my aunt came to the realization that she couldn't care for both children. It was give up X or give up Y. She seriously considered giving the non-disabled child X to my mom. She knew that he'd be well cared for and loved, etc., and she'd still have contact with him, and she'd be able to guarantee that Y would be looked after better than if we went to a home. But I think she realized that it would be too cruel for X. It's not his fault that his brother is sick, and he'd have to grow up knowing that he was less loved than his brother. She couldn't do that to him. She also knew that she was beginning to lose her emotional strength. Life was getting harder and harder. My dad found her contemplating self-unaliving one day, which was a bit of a wake-up call for everyone. She'd end up either killing Y out of desperation or herself out of guilt. As he grew older, Y became a lot stronger than my aunt and couldn't be controlled. He became violent to his brother and eventually had to go into a home. We all still visited as much as possible, though maybe it still wasn't enough. It was a massive relief for my aunt. She could go back to work, didn't have to worry about financial problems, and could rebuild her relationship with X and just focus on her own well-being. She gave up custody in the end so that he could be adopted by a family we'd found for him and not live in a home for the rest of his life. He, however, committed self-unaliving when he was 15. Story 37. We have a nearly 15-year-old daughter with Rett syndrome. She was born appearing perfectly healthy and then lost nearly everything. She's fully dependent on people for every aspect of life. She's in a wheelchair, has a feeding tube, seizures, and is nonverbal. She lost purposeful use of her hands around age 3. At age 13, she had spinal fusion surgery to correct severe scoliosis and has rods and 32 screws in her back. That limited her farther, yet cognitively, she's in there. She communicates using an eye gaze. Her condition is caused by a mutation in the X chromosome, but isn't inherited. It is caused by an issue with a single sperm or egg. We also have 2 healthy boys. We did not know about her condition until she was 2 or 3. Had I known before birth, we would have terminated. I love my daughter so much it hurts, but if she could have been spared this life, that decision would have been made. Rett shortens the life of its sufferers. They can live into their 40s, but many families we have known have lost their child far early, some before 10. So now we have to prepare daily for a painful loss on top of the stress of RS. I wish I could start over often. I may never have had children. The worry, the physical work in lifting her, the appointments 2 hours away, nights in the hospital, worries about lifetime limits on health insurance returning, fights with the school, and so much more is also exhausting. She's beautiful, alert, and responsive, but her life isn't fair at all. Rett sucks. Story 38. Not sure if this will get buried or not, but it's one of the first I can reply to. I have an almost 5-year-old daughter with short bowel syndrome, meaning she doesn't have all of her intestines. She was born with only 32 centimeters of small intestine and 30 centimeters of colon. She has a central line, semi-permanent IV placed straight to the heart that she gets 100% of her nutrition from, and a GJ tube, a feeding tube with a port to the stomach and a port to the jejunum, the second part of your small intestine. She is hooked up to pumps and bags of fluid, needs to be monitored closely, has an oral aversion so will not eat by mouth. We have to go to the ER to be poked and checked up with any fever of 100.4 Fahrenheit, which is often. We travel over 500 miles one way every month for care and medication that is not FDA approved. We knew when I was pregnant that something would be up, but didn't realize the extent until she was born and put into surgery. Besides the physical condition, mentally she is sharp and smart. She has an incredible memory and she's a great big sister. I am still glad I followed through with the pregnancy. She is valuable and a light in my life. The only time I second guess is when she is in pain and there's nothing I can do. Story 39. My good friend is a single mom to 2 autistic kids, and she suffers from anxiety and depression herself. She never wanted kids and met a man who had children to previous relationships. and when they got together, they had custody of those children, and so she went on to continue a family with him. He left her when she was pregnant with her second kid to him and a toddler. He financially ruined them and disappeared from their lives. So understandably, she's had some hard times. She struggles to parent her children because they are both so full on and she has pretty much no support where she lives. She moved away from her friends to be closer to her family, thinking they would help, but they haven't. And she has gone through a few depressive episodes where she has even booked herself to the hospital, I think largely to get a break before she loses it. Still, her family doesn't step in, and it's hard, and it's so hard to help her physically when she's so far away. She says recently that she feels like she is trying to prepare her kids for life skills because she doesn't think she will be around for them much longer. She also recently had a health scare and was devastated for the news that the biopsies were negative because she thought she finally had a way out. Story 40. My spouse has a younger sibling with autism. The sibling is relatively high functioning, but the household was chaotic during their childhood. This was back in the 90s, before there was more awareness for autism, but spouse's parents did all they could with occupational and sensory therapy and education plans. My spouse told me that their parents almost got divorced because raising the younger sibling was so taxing and hard. And I personally believe the dynamic contributed to spouse's maturity at a young age. Spouse is quite brilliant and self-sufficient. Spouse's parent spent $150,000 on an immersive program for young adults with autism in an effort to teach siblings basic life skills, laundry, cooking, budgeting, holding a job, in the hopes that siblings would pick up these skills and become semi-independent. Sadly, sibling was not a success story, as the habits developed while growing up were hard to break, namely lying and laziness. Sibling is now in their late 20s, lives in a house across the street from their parents, and still cannot hold a job. They are on SSI, but are still greatly supported by their parents. We are lucky in that spouse's parents have the foresight and the ability to set up a trust for younger sibling when they pass, and we are fully aware that spouse and I will be the guardians and trustees of younger sibling and their trust when this happens. This situation has also shaped our approach to our own family. We have one child now, and we went through heck for years to get our marriage back on track to a healthy place. I am still fighting mental illness myself, but it is getting better. Between spouse's experience growing up with a disabled sibling, our experience while our child was an infant and toddler, and the knowledge that we will be responsible for younger sibling at some point in the future, we decided not to have any more children. Our child is wonderful, but we do not want to risk rolling the dice and having to go through what spouse's parents went through. Story 41. My daughter is 8. She's a high-functioning person with autism. She's the best thing in the effing world. That said, there were absolutely times when I cried, freaked out, and wished she wasn't here. It's so hard because as a parent, you care so much about your child that you are in no way rational. I'm an extremely rational guy and have been through some serious crap, both in work and in life. Nothing has prepared me for being so emotionally involved with my daughter and her struggles. When she was in kindergarten, she had multiple meltdowns a day, and her classroom teacher wasn't a jerk but had no idea how to help her. The school had limited resources and structures for her to be successful. It was a hard year. I distinctly remember telling one of her other teachers, "F you, my child is awesome. Cram it up your butt, you female dog." Keep it in mind, I have multiple advanced degrees and should be better than that. Unfortunately, that poor teacher who bore the brunt of my wrath is a fantastic teacher who deeply cared about my kid. It was just a rough conversation that I wasn't prepared for. Luckily, that was an amazing teacher who brushed it off. 3 years later, my kid loves her, and she makes jokes about it to me. In 3 years, my kid has come so far. She's a great kid, funny, goofy, loves gaming, and can do serious math. Her social skills are lacking, but she gets by and has friends, which is all I have ever wanted. I'm so happy to spend time and travel with her. She's resilient as heck now, and as her communication skills have increased, she can express herself when she's anxious or needs a break, which has gone a long way in helping her cope. We've also discovered sometimes it's okay to let her tune out everyone and play her Game Boy or draw. Everyone learns and moves forward together. I'm hopeful for her future, and I love her so much, but I just wish she didn't have to deal with this. It's so many extra hurdles for her to be happy. I think she'll be fine and find her place, and I know I can't fight every battle for her. But seeing her struggle drives me insane. I know it's okay though, but it took a long time to get to this place emotionally. My wife and I had a few hard years of marriage as we dealt with how to make sure everyone gets the support they need to be the best that they can. That includes as a parent too. I've seen people on Reddit post and talk about their autism stories, and gosh, I love you all so much. You really helped me see the future and realize it's just another thing and it'll be okay. Thank you so much for that. Story 42. I'm sure it's too late for anyone to see, which is fine, probably just makes me feel better to type it out. I'm a father of 2 children. My 4-year-old daughter is fine. My 2-year-old son has Williams syndrome, which is pretty rare. Not a lot of doctors and therapists and other care providers are familiar with it, so a lot of the time the responsibility is on me to make sure they get informed and understand the ins and outs of what we're dealing with and will have to deal with in the future, so that his care is tailored to his situation. As far as how it's affected my life, when we had our first child, we were both pretty set that we didn't want any more, but we were irresponsible, and here we are. When he was born, I was self-employed, and we were doing fine. Since then, however, I've had to close the business and stay home to provide full-time care. My wife's job was corporate, so she had the 401k and benefits, etc. that we couldn't lose. So it fell to me to leave the workforce and stay home. This was not something I would have ever wanted to do, but the cost of paying for all of this care would have been so much more than I was making, with the added benefit that now we also don't have to pay for daycare for my daughter. I get a tiny bit of money from the state to be my son's caretaker, but we still struggle. We're due to file for bankruptcy this month. We are under a mountain of debt, thousands of outstanding debt from having to close my shop, been sued and had judgments levied against us. It's been a nightmare, really. As far as the kids go, my children are great on their own, but managing them together at the same time is really tough. My daughter is a nice kid, but she's a typical 4-year-old and wants to run around and make messes and make noise and just be a kid. But that makes her dangerous and reckless around her brother. My son is a wonderful kid. Despite his many physical and mental limitations, he has a great disposition. He's always happy for the most part. But when he and my daughter are together, which is every day, she is constantly harassing him and frustrating him, and he'll get upset and cry, and then she'll get upset and cry. It's a whole thing, which is just for me pretty much of 16 hours a day, tightrope walking to manage it. It's tough on my wife and I as well. She's had to adjust to being a sole provider, and I've had to adjust to feeling inadequate since I don't make a meaningful income anymore. Add to that her family doesn't understand the situation and is increasingly condescending and looks down on me for staying home with my kids as though it's what I would prefer, like I'm some kind of freeloader. I would love to be able to go back to work, to feel like I have some value in the world aside from being a babysitter, but that's just not in the cards for me. All of this, plus the financial problems, have put a huge strain on our relationship. As for my son, he has severe spinal issues, is in a full-time back brace which he hates and limits his movement, so crawling, etc. is even harder for him now. Severe and total developmental delays. He has a developmental age of 6 to 9 months at 2 years old. He can't eat food, so he still takes a bottle 6 times a day. Can't walk. Just learned to crawl a month ago. Can't talk and likely won't for a few more years. Has heart, lung, and other internal problems. Despite that stuff though, as far as Williams kids go, we've been very lucky. A lot of these kids have much worse issues and need open heart surgeries and other very risky stuff for tiny kids. Do I regret it? I feel guilty saying I regret it. We just live how we live, now you have to adjust and move on. Objectively, our lives would be better if we'd not had kids, or even if we just stopped at one as planned. But for the most part, I like these two idiots, so I'm okay with it. I do wish my son didn't have to suffer. I wish that us having my son didn't mean that my daughter is going to have to live a different and more difficult life due to sacrifices we'll have to make to care for our son. But wishing doesn't work. Work works. So we do our best and hope we don't fail. I am certainly very scared though. Scared we'll not make it. Scared I'll F up my kids' lives and not just my own anymore. I really hope they turn out okay. I don't know if that helps at all. Story 43. I have a 6-year-old who has Down syndrome and autism spectrum disorder. There have been many, many difficult times, but I can honestly say that I've never regretted having my child. He has a really great life, and sounds cliche and glib, but has made me a better person and made me a part of an amazing community. I appreciate how he experiences the world, and he has a place in the world. He is so funny and sweet and expressive and affectionate and playful and stubborn, yet he doesn't actually speak a single word. Well, he does say no fairly frequently. If you're going to learn one word to speak that everyone understands, I guess no is the best choice. That said, I don't believe that just anyone can do this. I can, my spouse can, we have resources. I'm a social worker, so I already knew how to advocate and work the medical and home and community-based support systems. I don't think you need my kind of resume to have a child with disabilities. Down syndrome is going to happen every 1 in 1,000 pregnancies regardless. But I do think we have the emotional fortitude to take this on. Our ability to manage and endure our challenges are reflective of benefiting from a culture that is catered to us. Read white, non-disabled, English-speaking, educated middle class. We have access to luxuries like therapy, and we go when we need to. We are honest with each other. We have easy access to a huge online community of other parents when we have questions or need help or need to hear that we're not alone. I know many people who are also good at this and come from many different backgrounds. And I know people with identical backgrounds to ours who would be terrible at this. Nevertheless, I believe, in our case, we are good at this because our charmed lives have made it so much easier for us to be good at this. Disability can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. I want to live in a world where anyone can do this, because it's not fair that some people are better equipped than others. My kid has given me a higher calling to fight cultural, social, and systemic inequities relating to disability, and I'm grateful for my child. Story 44. I have a son, 6 years old, with Down syndrome, and he has a rare heart defect unrelated to his DS. I found out when I was 7 months pregnant, and I was still offered an abortion, which is beyond disturbing in my opinion, but that's another story. I wouldn't change anything about my life or my son. He was my first, so his development rate is normal to me, whereas with my second son, 3 years, he seems abnormal because of how fast he develops. My son can walk, run, play soccer, read a book, and has gross motor skills are on par with his physical age. His cognitive skills and fine motor skills are a little behind, and he doesn't really use words. He uses words in sign language. Honestly, it's all very normal. It isn't a huge burden. His heart defect worries me more. The hardest part? Dealing with everyone else. Everyone thinks Down syndrome is such a hardship. Everyone thinks my son can't do this or that. Everyone assumes, because of the propaganda against Down syndrome, that his life and mine are horrible. Honestly, out of all the genetic defects or disabilities out there, Down syndrome is so easily managed compared to, say, autism, where the spectrum is so wide and varied, or schizophrenia, for example. My son never disappoints me in his abilities, but the ignorance of some other people absolutely does. Story 45. So I have 3 children, 2 with disabilities. I have a 4-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 1-year-old. We found in the utero that our middle child would be born with trisomy 21, an extreme heart defect, lung defect, and GI defect. It was difficult for me because I am anti-abortion. I so desperately did not want my own life consumed by a cognitively challenged child requiring a host of medical care. I also didn't want him or his brother to suffer, but I couldn't go through the abortion myself because of the torture of not knowing if he would be affected as bad as projected. What if I had killed my baby and he functioned somewhat normally, and we would have been happy? We chose to continue the pregnancy, and he was born via induction at a top children's hospital and whisked away from me before I could ever see him. We spent a long half a year in the hospital, with many surgeries and procedures before we could even bring him home. Now, at his age, it is a struggle. He eats through a tube surgically placed in his intestines, which needs 24/7 care and attention. He takes loads of medicines every single day, therapies every single day. It's extremely exhausting, not to mention the social problems we face being stared at, kids and their parents passing judgments, not being invited to attend things, the pity parties from religious family members doing their good. Having said that, he is not our difficult one that is tying our marriage. Shortly after we brought our middle child home, our older child was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. He has no fear, no empathy, zero understanding of his surroundings. He needs watched 24/7. He's violent, loud, and never sleeps. We have to give him medication so that we can squeeze 4 to 6 hours of sleep out of him a night so that we can function. He doesn't have friends because he hurts everybody. Nobody in our house sleeps because he is constantly running and screaming. My goodness, the screaming. Sometimes I legitimately have to check if my ears are bleeding from the head pain I get from all of the screaming. He goes to preschool, but needs an aid. He runs into the streets, he bites total strangers, he does things that a typical child wouldn't dare because of the implementation of danger, like touching a hot stove or sticking his head under heavy objects. I love him when times are good. For a young child, he carries extensive conversations with us in such detail that it's actually enjoyable to debate with him. It's a strange experience, but he is wise beyond his years and ways. Unfortunately, the good times are few and far between, and I find myself more often than not contemplating having him removed from our home, because he is absolutely ruining the quality of life of everyone in our family. I would absolutely have another child with Down syndrome if I was told in utero, but if there was a way to tell definitely that a child would have such an extensive spectrum disorder like our older son, I was given the chance to abort with the knowledge, I would have now. Story 46. Someone sent me the link to this thread. The only thing they said is, just read it. I have been sitting here for 2 hours now reading. For the first time in a very long time, I don't feel alone. I have 4 children. My partner calls them my unicorns, children who just shouldn't exist. Not because we don't love them, but no one should have to deal with all of that in one body. My oldest son has ADHD, severe anxiety, celiacs, atrial fibrillation, for which he has had surgery, fibromyalgia. He's 23. My second son has autism, anxiety of dyspraxia, dysgraphia, borderline ADHD, and severe allergies as a child. We are awaiting a fibro diagnosis at the moment. He's 21. My oldest daughter has gastroparesis, superior mesenteric artery syndrome, functional neurological disorder, and a central pain disorder. My partner is currently in the hospital with her. Again, she is 19. My youngest daughter has severe anxiety and severe allergies to peanuts and yeast. She's my normal one. She is 17. I stopped telling anyone about my kids. Heck, I stopped telling people I had kids. You can only take so many blank stares, so many mumbled sorries. My oldest won a scholarship to play basketball. He couldn't take it in the end, but he got that far. My younger son wasn't meant to start school. He finished 4 years of high school, has a job, and a girlfriend. My oldest daughter has spent the last year entering 50s pinup competitions, and she is winning. My youngest is still at school, but just received her first modeling contract. We live with hospitals, doctors, pills, drips, feeding tubes, meltdowns, ambulances, and a severe lack of sleep sometimes. But we dig in, eat junk food if that is all we have the energy for, and we cry when we need to. I have spent more money, time, tears than I can even remember, but it was worth it. They all have jobs. They all have partners and a chance at life. I was told with at least 2 that they wouldn't. For those parents who can't parent these kids, that's okay. The number of times I have wished either they or I didn't exist is insane. It's okay to say I can't do this. For those who can, hugs and love, 5 minutes of quiet, and all the strength in the world. You are doing a great job, even when you're sure you're not. Fight, and fight hard, for them, but also for yourself. No, I didn't know any of my kids would have these issues. Yes, if given the choice, I would have them again. I fought, they fought, and now, finally, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Story 47. I know this isn't exactly what the question is asking, but I'll offer my perspective anyway. I am the sister of an intellectually disabled 18-year-old. For the record, I realize I'm not her parent and don't do nearly as much as they do, but I care for her in a lot of ways. Occasionally dressing her, bathing her, making her food, etc. I'll say it simply. It gets very hard sometimes. It's hard when she has meltdowns, and it's hard how she can't do some things for herself. It's hard when she refuses to get up or distracts me from things I'm concentrated on. However, the hardest thing is the knowledge of what the future holds, as I know it will become a very tedious situation if it gets to the stage where my parents can no longer care for her. However, I never wished that my parents didn't have her, and I know for a fact that they don't either. She is the light in all of our lives, and I would do absolutely anything for her. My parents were also very good at sharing attention with us, and I'm very grateful for the ever-growing opportunities for disabled people in society now. Story 48. My child was born with DiGeorge syndrome. It caused him to have a severe heart defect called truncus arteriosus. He had open heart surgery at 11 days old and was never able to get off the ventilator, so he got a tracheostomy. Due to the multiple failed extubations and hypoxic events, she had global developmental delay. He had a second open heart surgery at about 5 months old. My son was never able to walk or talk. He had the developmental age of a baby. He lived to be 5 years old before he passed away. I don't ever regret having him. He changed my and my wife's lives in so many ways. We had 2 other children while he was alive, but only after we found out the genetic testing showed us it was a fluke and my wife didn't carry the gene to cause the syndrome. Having a child home with a tracheostomy and a ventilator is very taxing. If I knew then what I know now, we may not have chosen for him to have a trach. Like it said, we don't regret our decisions. We were able to give him a happy life, but it was obvious his body was not meant for this world. He lived a hard, uncomfortable life. His passing actually gave us peace. A lot of our friends and family don't understand that. They feel like we should have grieved more. But they didn't live our lives day in and day out. They didn't see his struggles like we did. I miss my boy so much, but mostly when I remember him, I feel warmth, not sadness. Story 49. Late to the game, so I'll be surprised if this is seen. I still feel new to the special needs group, even though my son has been wrapped up in various severity that I still don't fully understand 4 years after this started. He's had global delays since birth and epilepsy since age 3. He'll be 7 in a few months. Only this last February, he was formally diagnosed with the kind of temporal lobe epilepsy that has a high chance of producing psychosis later in life. This is only the beginning. He's my second child, and it was a real struggle second-guessing myself and dealing with bitterness and anger, and still is. I can see how his quality of life suffers in certain ways, though I'd move mountains to make his dreams possible. Our entire family suffers in different ways trying to make the world work for that boy. There is a measure of peace in the fact that from his perspective, this is all he's ever known, and this is what life is supposed to to look like. His mental capacity hasn't reached the point where he notices what he's lacking yet. I'm anxious because I know even more medication is coming that takes from the quality of his life, and I'm not sure at what point he realizes how unfair life really is. I don't know what I will say or could say to him to make that easier when that happens. I recently had my third child. I didn't think I'd be emotionally affected by my son's diseases, but I far overestimated my self-control. Halfway through the pregnancy, I found myself questioning what I had done and if I had made a mistake, questioning if I were only capable of making faulty children. Watching my healthy infant grow is a joy and also uniquely terrifying. I thought he was healthy too, but there are never any guarantees. I love my son passionately, my beautiful boy who looks like me, delicate features and gap-toothed smile, obsessed with motorcycles and going faster. Who could school anyone on any superhero? The same blue eyes as my father, a sweet disposition. I'm not sure how much longer I'll have with my boy as he is, but I'm trying to enjoy him for as long as I have him. Story 50. I'm 17. I have a friend who is 17, who is also autistic but highly functioning. He's not a super genius autist, but more of a nerdy kind. He also has Asperger's. His brother, who is 6, is also autistic, but much less functioning. This kid screams at the sound of rain and wears this huge sombrero everywhere or else he goes nuts. But otherwise they bond greatly over their love of Star Wars. I don't see their mom that often, but I see their dad a lot. Their mom often goes away for work. Their dad is honestly the kindest person you will ever meet. This guy puts up with 2 autistic kids on a daily basis, almost 24/7, and stays sane. I can sometimes get driven to insanity by my friend after a 30-minute lecture on why the original General Grievous backstory is better than the new one. But their dad deals with it constantly and stays sane. Honest to God, rivals the Pope as the best and coolest person on the planet. He used to be a teacher before having kids. After his third, the autistic brother, he stopped teaching completely and went on to give speeches and demonstrations to help other parents struggling with disabled kids. Story 51. Father of a child with complex congenital heart disease here. My boy is classed disabled because of his reduced stamina and needing assistance to walk longer or for bigger exertion. Please excuse my bad English, not a native speaker. Story. Before he was born, we were warned that the heart is defective and the potential issues we could have with the baby, including Downs or other chromosomal defects. We decided to leave it on fate and let the boy have a chance at life, especially because we were very close to a great hospital and the medical team visited to explain what treatments are available in all scenarios. He was taken to a specialist unit for heart and only came out after 2 surgeries and 2 months. Luckily, he never needed oxygen or other support out of hospital. Neither did he have any chromosomal defects that impacted his brain or quality of life more than I explained below. He was hard work in baby years, needed attention of 1.5 parents every day, just a rough calculation. For first year, neither of us worked any job to take care of him. Extra work as compared to our elder one was trying to get him to eat or drink enough and to keep him from becoming breathless, which would make him sick. Lots of painful times, cleaning and work. We, both us parents and the older sibling, have had a hard working life with him around. We all work extra because of his condition. That being said, every year it gets better and better. Looking at him, you would only notice he is smallish, but would not be able to tell that he is a blue baby. He is progressing life at a normal pace. Nursery, school, learning, etc. He is physically far behind than his age group, but exceeds in non-physical growth. Being from Europe has helped a lot. We could not have imagined how hard it would be if we had to pay for treatment. Not a single cent paid for his whole treatment. We do have to spend extra at groceries to help him out, but at some time, grants, etc. helped cover it. Having a disabled status helps a lot with day-to-day life. Free close parking, speedy check-in with traveling, assistance where needed, no or minimal queue at Disney parks. Weighing everything, it is in fact a difficult thing to think about, and there are sometimes regretful thoughts about the whole ordeal. That being said, what tips the balance in life's favor is the boy himself. He is full of smiles, full of life, full of happy times, dreams, stories, and hugs and kisses. He also now knows and kinda understands his condition. Thinking of all of that, we would regret more if we never had him than the other way around. I hope I explained it well. Please do ask if there are any questions. Story 52. My wife and I have 2 kids. The older one has been diagnosed with high-functioning autism, ADHD, ODD, and IED. He cannot be left unsupervised for more time than it takes to take a really fast dump. He sees a therapist every 2 weeks and a psychiatrist every month. He's on meds for behavior, blood pressure, and to help him stay asleep. Our younger son goes to speech therapy and occupational therapy 3 times a week. He's been diagnosed as definitely autistic and has 2 more appointments coming up to see how deep the rabbit rabbit hole goes. My wife and I had almost no time alone together in the last 5.5 years. She's exhausted, I'm exhausted, and we can't get the younger one to sleep anywhere but in our bed. The last time we had intimacy was 2 years ago, on the bathroom floor. He woke up during because he was alone and started screaming because he was alone. We never finished. Story 53. I'm really late to this party, but this is something I can slightly answer from a different perspective. My stepson is severely mentally and physically disabled. He is currently 12 and has the mind of a 2-year-old without the ability to talk. He kind of just grunts around. When I first started dating my significant other, I knew he had a child. He didn't exactly tell me the issues this kid had. At the time, I was fine with it. Kids are kids. I liked the guy, no big deal. I didn't meet his son for months, which is fine because if I had a child, I wouldn't introduce him to just anyone. Well, things turned and I got pregnant with my first. After 2 months of, what are we going to do? My significant other convinced me to keep the baby. After deciding to stay together and raise our child, I finally met Aiden. It took me a while to understand the severity of the situation. I just thought he was slightly delayed. I never had any exposure to mentally challenged people. Within the first year of my child's life, I began to regret dating his dad because of his son. I was only 19, became a mother and a stepmother to a child that will eat his own crap if you aren't watching him. A kid that has weekly therapy appointments and still in diapers at the age of 5. With all that, we have my stepson's mother realizing that his dad is no longer just a phone call away and causing drama every day because she was jealous of me. If you asked me a few years ago, yes, I would have wished that I never dated that man and never got pregnant. I would have wished that I just said no when he asked me out. But ask me now, and I am the happiest woman in the world, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I had 2 sons with that man, and we got married last October. And I guess I still have some really bad, angry feelings. Not for the kid, but just kind of like, I'm going to spend my adult life taking care of someone. We are never going to be truly alone. I always thought of being old and going across the country in an RV with my husband, just us two. I don't want to share his attention with his son at that point in my life. I don't even want to share his attention with my own kids. I don't want to have to stop at the gas station and have to take a 30-year-old man in the bathroom with me to change his diaper. But it is what it is. Story 54. My son is high-functioning autistic, has cerebral palsy, torticollis, spelled wrong, I think, and a few others. He has almost no impulse control. It's getting better, though. He can be downright mean, says absolutely horrible things sometimes, like, I'm going to kill you or I'm going to break your face. Things he's heard elsewhere and doesn't understand the gravity of what he's saying. The only thing I regret is hiding the first month of his life because I was too scared to witness his death at the hospital. He spent a month in the children's hospital. He was doing very badly. His skin was red and swollen. We couldn't touch him without him screaming. I just couldn't deal with it. So my wife did, and I hate myself for that. I want to throw all the pictures from the hospital away because of the reminder of what I did. It's not his fault he's the way he is. If I don't help him through, this will be it. I don't regret him at all. Things happen. People are people. Just gotta learn to navigate those kind of situations. We just want more help. But we love our Tristan. When he's not being a butthead, he's amazing. You will learn and grow far more from children with these issues than you could ever from kids without disabilities. Patience is the biggest. You know, I can't speak on mental disability, but as someone also named Tristan, I can say that we do require a lot of patience. But keep your head up, eventually we're kind of worth it. Well, the other ones are. The jury's still out on me. Story 55. I'm not a parent, but my brother was disabled. And I already know my mom's answer. He was born with hydrocephalus, and when he was just a couple months old, he came down with meningitis due to a screw-up in the brain surgery he had. The meningitis left him blind, unable to walk and talk, wheelchair-bound, a seizure disorder, and he had to eat using a feeding tube. From the time he was 6 months old until the day he died at 8 years old, he's had 25 plus major surgeries and various shunts on his brain. He's almost died when he was 4, in a comatose state in the hospital for months with the doctors telling my mom it was time for him to go. But when my mom was getting ready to have the plug pulled to let him go, he woke up. He died October 4th, 2008, exactly 2 weeks before his 9th birthday from a brain stem failure. But my mom says it's okay that he passed. He'd been in constant pain for 8 years, and he lived 4 years past when everyone thought he was supposed to go. She always says she doesn't regret anything about my brother. She loves him for who he was and wouldn't change him for the world, because the son she had was the son she was given by God, and that's how he wanted him to be. And she loved my brother as he was more than anything else. He was her little fighter. Story 56. My youngest son has Down syndrome. He's 6, in kindergarten, and thankfully does not have many major medical issues other than the need for constant ear tubes. His speech is delayed when compared to normal kids, and he functions with significant learning disabilities. But he's just as smart as any other normal person. He has a good memory, knows his routine, which you cannot mess with unless you want World War III, and frequently strikes us with bouts of intelligence that many others don't have. So why say that in the light of learning disability or the speech delays? He simply has no care in the world for things that aren't important to him. We can't teach him the importance of doing his schoolwork other than to show him when it works and praise him when he does it right. All he cares is that if it's 10 a.m. and he wants a snack, then screw that teacher with the pencil and paper. A mark goes down on the report stating that he cannot write his name. No, he's just not interested in doing it when you want him to do it. I'm also an educator, so I'll save my public school rants for elsewhere. Back at home, mealtimes might make me wish for someone to kidnap me and harvest my liver, as it would be easier for me to learn how to survive afterward than to make my kid eat his food. He could be starving, not having a full meal in 2 days, but gosh dang it, he'll demand some cucumber slices or potato chips. Maybe 6,000 chocolate chip Pop-Tarts. We don't have those? Hey, go get 'em! When it's time to have a bath and get ready for bed, if someone is sitting in the wrong chair before the process begins, a meltdown will ensue, and the aforementioned speech issues make us think he said he was bitten by a rabid camel that was lurking behind the refrigerator, when he really meant, Dad was sitting one spot to the left in the sofa than his normal spot. I know this is supposed to be a serious post, and I'm starting to poke in humor. I have to. So moderators, I hope you can forgive that this time. See, the thing is, if you had asked me years ago if I would accept a life raising a child with mild disabilities, I'd have said, absolutely not. But now that I have this child in my life, not only are there no regrets, I cannot fathom ever going back. As much as it frustrates the absolute heck out of me that I doubt I'll ever be able to afford a family vacation again in my life, it's entirely worth it. This child has forced me to become a better man, to persevere in my moments of failure and endure stresses and hardships that would make others cringe. Like a faithful friend, he instantly forgives me when I make those awful mistakes made when his mother and I are worn out beyond our senses. And I, as his father, can say with reserve that my wife endures a life 1,000 times more difficult than mine. Even though I work multiple jobs to allow her to stay at home, I get an escape. Life is difficult, messy, and filled with opportunities for despair. Our child has a tiny fraction of disabilities that others endure. I have no room to complain as others have it worse. It's difficult though, but every day when the sun comes up and my boy says a happy good morning, nothing else matters in the world. No regrets, I'll never go back. Story 57. I have a daughter with osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a brittle bone disease. Today is actually her 3rd birthday, and she's had almost 10 serious breaks. It's definitely a struggle for everyone in the family and can be torturous for her. I've spent evenings taking unexpected trips to the hospital that end up being 3-day ordeals with surgery with months recovery time. Imagine the scorned looks you get from people when you're carrying around an infant with casts on her legs. She has an older brother, and naturally he has friends his age. The neighbor has a trampoline, and I have to be the terrible a-hole who won't let her on when she just sees other kids being kids. My heart skips a beat every time I see her climb on the furniture, and I'm always scared for the worst when she takes off running. To answer your question, I regret nothing. Yeah, it's hard on me a lot of times. It's hard on all of us. I broke a few bones in my lifetime, yet I still can't imagine the pain she feels. Not just from broken bones, but also from knowing she's different from all the kids she knows. It's worth it. And before you think, yeah, she's a child now, let's see how she's after 10 more years. This bone disease is genetic. My wife has it, her father has it, his mother, etc. My 30-year-old wife has over 90 breaks and fractures in her medical record. Those are just the ones that she went to the hospital for. She treats minor ones at home. She's lived through it, and she grew up to be an amazing person, a successful entrepreneur, a great mother, and an incredible wife. If anybody I know ever had justified apprehensions about having children with disabilities, it's her. And my wife and I have had this discussion many times over the last 10 years. Hearing her tell me her perspective and thoughts made a huge impact on mine. I used to lean more towards, who would want a life like that? Whereas now I can see that even a life without serious problems can be a life well worth living. Heck, some people who have perfectly healthy bodies often end up feeling like they have lives not worth living. The thing is, I feel like my daughter deserves a shot at life just like anybody else. I try to provide for her as best as I can. It's hard to imagine life without her right now. She's walking and talking, using the potty, playing video games, and just finding her way through life. She's amazing. I understand that all disabilities vary in degree, and I accept I have a limited understanding of others. But I know hers, and it's a very difficult one for her. I know the road forward is going to be extremely painful at times, and it's going to be a massive strain on my family. It's a sacrifice I've had to make, but she is worth it. Story 58. I don't regret it because he's the most amazing little boy ever, but there are definitely days that I feel sorry for everything he's gone through and will continue to go through as he gets older. Turns out my wife's side of the family has a genetic disorder that no one really knew about, and it just happened to present itself really severely in my son. He ended up spending almost 2 months in the NICU and had 3 major surgeries before he even had a year and a half, OT, PT, and speech so far. He had so many invasive surgeries and doctor visits when he was little, I seriously worried he'd just be miserable all the time. He's older now, and except for his glasses and a bit of speech impediment, you wouldn't know he was just a normal kiddo. He's out of the woods for now, but he's probably going to need a few more surgeries and interventions as he gets older. He'll also probably end up with arthritis at a really young age. I think the thing that kills me the most is that whenever he decides to start a family, he'll have to wrestle with whether or not he wants to risk passing on his condition to his children. It's a 50-50 shot it will get passed on, and his geneticist seems to think the condition is worsening each progressive generation. So Lord knows how it would present itself in his kids, and I hate that he'll have to go through that. Story 59. Close, but not quite. I raised my little sisters and am still paying their way through school. My mother, I was raised by my grandparents, who raised me correctly. I considered my grandmother my mother, is a complete basket case. Before you ask, yes, she has mental issues, not going into that on a public forum. My mother could never stand once people suddenly didn't agree with her viewpoint or could argue with her. She was great with babies, terrible with teens and adults. When my older sister, raised by mother, left the household and cut my mother out of her life, was close to the same time my grandmother developed Alzheimer's, and I was forced to move to live with my mother. I, being raised in a much different way, was taught that curiosity and challenging perspectives was a good thing. Obviously, had a terrible relationship with my mother. My mother, not knowing how to handle these things, decided to adopt. She adopted 2 drug babies from the state, the older of which was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. Think a child with absolutely no impulse control, close to autism but not quite. The younger one had nothing. She has since developed depression due to her older sister, but I can't really fault myself for how I was forced to be in the situation of being a parent for my little sisters at age 13. Could I have done things better now that I am in my 30s? Yes. When I left to go to college, they were both in their teens or late elementary level. I have rarely been home since, but still support them financially, and they have my phone number and text me all the time to ask for advice about what to do about mom. I do not regret being there for my sisters at all, as nobody else would have been. However, I do regret being put in the position where I was not ready to be in that position. I was put in by someone else's choices. It was a quick and dirty welcoming to adulthood. I am glad at the end of the day that they were adopted. The environment they would have been placed into would have been terrible for them had it not been for me taking up slack of both their birth mother or my mother. I hope that as they get older, I will be able to have a closer relationship with them, one not involved with being an authority figure. Edit. This is heavily sanitized and barely tells how difficult it was. I, at 15, was arguing with their teachers to have the older one put into a special school, while my mother just sat there silently, being willing to sign whatever agreement we came to. It was far more in-depth than I'm willing to talk about publicly. I actually didn't plan on posting this, but once I did, I just kept going. Story 60. I've been my son's dad since he was 7. Bio dad is a real piece of crap, was never really there, a real crap bag when he was, and we're all happy to not have him around. When I started dating my now ex, I found out he had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, one of the worst strains. At the time, I didn't know how bad it would get, but he's 25 now, and doctors said he'd be lucky to see 18. So, I got a choice in the matter. Originally, he would walk on the balls of his feet because his leg muscles were already starting to contract. He broke his foot, muscles atrophied very quickly, and he wasn't able to regain use of his legs after that. At this point, he could barely move his arms, hands, and fingers to control his chair and computer mouse. We have to do everything else for him. Showers, bathroom duties, feedings, etc. Because he takes so much care, and because it could have such a significant detrimental impact upon his mental and physical well-being, we decided to stay living together, despite being broken up. His condition made it nearly impossible for us to have a date night or even do anything public as a family. Usually one of us would get to do something while the other stayed home. Family would offer to come watch him so he could be in the comfortable setting and we could go out. But that was still a very short time limit because he wouldn't go to the bathroom unless one of us would take care of him. Adding to that, she is paid to be his caregiver, staying home and taking care of him and the house. She began to resent me because I worked outside the house, and she still says that I'm gone all the time, while she is stuck at home and can't get out. While I understand her point, I find that he and I can get out for short, under 2 hour trips to do stuff. She does have more trouble lifting him though, and it is harder for her, but not impossible. Plus, he can only sit in his chair for a certain amount of time. Once we put him into his chair, the clock is ticking for us to load him up, go do stuff, unload and load him at each shop, come home, unload him, and get back into bed. We have a small bed in the living room where he watches TV and movies, and we feed him. Sometimes, if I only have a couple items, I'll ask if he wants to get down or stay in the van, and I'll just rush in and out, wasting no time. He's an adult and can make his own decisions. Through all of that, I cherish each day with him. He's the absolute love of my life, and I'm going to be devastated on the day when I find him in his bed, no longer a part of mine. Having a kid with severe disabilities and a decreased lifespan is hard. I don't wish it upon anyone, and I might make a different decision were I to go back to a point in my life. While I have regrets about what has happened throughout our life, I have no regrets about deciding to be his dad. Edit. If I knew what I would have, no knowledge of all the joy and love I'd be missing out on, I might take a different path. I regret the hardships we faced and missed opportunities, but I have no regrets about choosing to love him as my own. Story 61. I am the youngest of 3 siblings at 21. My sister is the oldest at 27 and is severely disabled, both mentally and physically. I cannot speak for my parents, but can give some perspective. My parents have not taken longer than a 2-week holiday in over 27 years. Their entire lives have been molded around my sister's disability, and it stopped them from doing so many things that they would have liked to do. I've never felt like I missed out on anything, but definitely noticed as I grew older the simple things that we as a family didn't participate in, because logistically it was too hard to involve my sisters. My parents haven't been able to make a single spontaneous decision since my sister was born. Let's go out for dinner tonight. Let's go away for the weekend. Let's go for the beach since it's the nice weather. My parents' bodies are wrecked from lifting and caring for her. And government or privatized care is expensive, but getting better in Australia. They are recently using the respite facilities more. My parents would never say that they regretted having her. They originally only wanted 2 children, but after having my able brother, wanted another able sibling for him. So here I am. We all love her and care for her. My parents are honestly the most honorable and selfless people, and I often think how lucky she is to be born to them. When she was born, they were immediately offered adoption by the hospital staff, but kept her. She has made me and my brother kinder, more practical, and caring people. However, it is a general consensus that if there was an option of her not being born, it would be picked. My parents are big supporters of legal euthanasia. I think partly because at some point my sister will die, possibly quite painfully, in a hospital situation. She is not aware of her own existence, we don't think, so we aim to give her the best quality of life possible. When my parents retire in the next 5 years, we aim to move her into a home. This may be difficult because of what is available and her unique issues. Me and my other sibling know we will have a lot of responsibility in regards to her for the rest of our lives, which is something my parents never wanted. Anyway, a long first post. It's an incredibly hard situation to be in, but hey, that's the lot we got in life, and it's much nicer to accept and build on it than wallow. I'm gonna go hug my rents now. Story 62. I have an almost 8-year-old with Down syndrome. I didn't know what was up with him when he was born. I only knew something wasn't right. Long bones measuring shorter than gestational age, a very narrow chest that could interfere with lung inflation, none of the typical in utero markers existed. He is nonverbal. He says about 10 words and about 10 signs. He's not potty trained, and it's not going to happen soon either. My oldest son was DX in the 3rd grade with Asperger's. DSMIV did away with the separation from the rest of the autism spectrum, but it is useful for severity description. He has a lot of emotional issues and is emotionally younger than his chronological age. His issues have been much more difficult to work through. So I have one child whose difficulties manifested at birth and one whose came later on. The latter is a lot harder. I have not been sorry about having them. There are rewards buried under the poop and tears that I have a very hard time expressing the depth of joy those rewards bring. Every new word, every situation handled correctly brings a satisfaction that the work we all have put in matters. With typical children, advancement comes from within and is self-guided, not the case with non-typicals. They need us to make sure they advanced. I'm not having any more children. 2 out of 3 non-typicals have me at my limit. I am also a person who would not have chosen this, and sometimes wonder why my life unfolded this way. And then my son with Down syndrome does something new, or my oldest reacts appropriately and I don't feel that way anymore. No one can say that they would do one thing or another when they have not been in that situation. No one should tell someone else what they should or shouldn't do in those situations either. The situations are as individual as the people living them. Story 63. Not disabled per se. My 6-year-old son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 11 months old. Initially, the shock of it is all awful. Knowing he's going to have this for the rest of his life is heartbreaking. The major benefit for it is that he has had it almost his entire life. It's all he knows. He's real good at doing all the stuff associated with it, and now has a continuous glucose monitor as well as an insulin pump. It's hard still. His sugar can go up and down without reason. I don't get a good night's sleep because I'm constantly half awake listening for his alarm in case he goes low or high overnight. When he's in school, he has to leave class during the day to go to the health office to do diabetes-related care, insulin, snack, etc. About a month ago, we were watching cartoons before bed, and he turned to me and said, "Daddy, I wish I didn't have diabetes. I just wish I was normal." And it broke my effing heart. I read the comments of kids that have it much worse than my little guy. In the big scope of things, he got off easy. Technology is great in this disease process. My ex-wife and I had another kid after. We get him tested through research grant to study the cause of diabetes and sibling antigens. But every time my little guy exhibits any diabetic signs, there's a feeling in the pit of my stomach that he's going to get it too. I don't regret having kids. My oldest is an amazing, sweet, caring, smart little guy. He's had to grow up fast, understanding the disease process and how his body feels when he goes low or high, knowing when to or not to eat or have a snack. But it's hard when he's realizing that he's different and just wants to be able to be like every other kid in kindergarten. Story 64. Apologies up front for formatting. I am on mobile. I have a very mild, type 1 form of osteogenesis imperfecta. It is a genetic bone disorder that causes low bone density. My brother and I got it from our father. He and his brother got it from their father, and he in turn got it from his mother. We all have type 1, which is very mild compared to a lot of others with the same disorder. My wife and I got married young, 18 and 19. And she got pregnant 9 months later with our first child, a boy, who turned out perfectly normal and healthy. My wife had ovulation issues, so we thought he would be our only child and were ecstatic. Almost 2 years later, she got pregnant again, much to our surprise. Throughout both pregnancies, I was acutely aware that there was a 50-50 chance that I could pass this disorder on to my children. But with my first son being normal, I wasn't so worried the second time. Now, it must be said that there are certain physical characteristics that are signs that one has OI. Triangular face, barrel chest, flat feet, and blue parts of the eyes, the white parts. Our second son had all of these signs, but I was in denial and didn't want to admit it to myself, although I knew deep down right away that he had it. 9 months later, my older son tried to replicate a wrestling move that he had seen at his uncle's house and jumped from the top of the sofa onto his brother who was crawling by, and he broke his brother's arm. I tried to play it off as something that would have happened to any child, but from there it was a downward spiral of broken bones and I could no longer deny it. It turns out that OI can vary in severity under the same type, which was news to my entire family. He had over 300 breaks by the time he was 19 and too many surgeries to count. His legs could no longer support him and he was confined to a wheelchair at 15. He passed away from complications caused by bacterial pneumonia on October 7th, 2017 at 19 years old. He had a rough and painful life, but he was always the one to make people laugh or brighten the room when he entered. He had a love for life that is unmatched by anyone I have met in the spite of pain. He was enrolled to our local community college and had met a girl with the same disability online and was very much smitten. I've had 20 years to ponder your question, and my answer is no. I don't regret it, and he didn't harbor any resentment towards me for passing it on to him. I and so many others are better people for having known Tyler. Sure, there are things I would have done differently as far as his care was concerned, but I have no regrets, ever, for being his father. Story 65. I have a child with level 2 autism, oppositional defiance disorder, and ADHD with heavy OCD symptoms. He was nonverbal until he was almost 5. He parrots a lot even to this day. When he's totally lucid and not trapped in his own head, he's truly a sweet, caring child. When he spirals, it's pure heck. He's getting older now, starting puberty, and his outbursts are pretty bad. He screams and cries and yells while crying and gets violent, hitting, biting, throwing things. We're currently weaning him off antipsychotics for his anger because they stopped working and started making him worse. When it gets bad, I think I start to shut down lately as much as he does. I'm afraid of the future if he continues being violent as he grows. He's almost 100 pounds now and can easily overpower me if he gets the early advantage. Just yesterday, we had a meltdown over him being told we couldn't go to the store that exact minute he wanted to, and he ended up swinging around a plastic toy lawnmower to keep me at distance while he screamed at the top of his lungs. I had to take a few hits to get it from him to try and address the top of his lungs shrieking nonstop because he was told no, while laughing because he knows he's hurting me. I love him to absolute death, but I can't lie, some days I just end up feeling seething hot rage that I have to bite down and hide. I am absolutely terrified for his future and mine because I know if things continue spiraling, he will end up in a group home for his safety, ours and his siblings' safety, and I know it'll absolutely destroy him inside if that happens. But I'm beyond my own coping means, and already do I try, boy do I ever, and I bottle my negative emotions until I'm just alone and I can cry until I go numb. I'm torn between hating that this is my life and feeling absolutely terrible for feeling like that because his life is harder for him to live with than me. It's getting harder with him hitting puberty early. He started touching people inappropriately, which we've been working on fixing, but it's a struggle daily. If there were prenatal testing that could have detected his problems like there are for other genetic disorders, I'm sorry, but I would have aborted in a heartbeat. I deeply regret not aborting that pregnancy, and it makes me feel terrible because at the same time I do love him so much, but no, I would not put someone through life like this, or myself through it ever again. I would be a flat-out liar if I said there weren't times I had wanting to self-unalive just to escape my life. I think that's normal though, yeah? Nothing I can't push past and carry on with. Story 66. My youngest, of 4, is 9 and has cerebral palsy. GMFCS-IV. Her uses a power wheelchair, can use a gait trainer with a lot of help for short distances, can transfer into or out of his chair from the same height surfaces like his bed. I dress him, help him into his chair if needed, prepare all his meals, change his diapers. We are working on the toilet, but he sometimes can't tell when he has to go. Bathe him and carry him to places his chair can't go. Only our bathroom is on the second floor. Most of the time my back and knees hurt, and between him and my other kids, I'm completely exhausted. I sleep in my living room to be close enough to him to help him if he needs me, in the night or if he rolls out of bed. Any suggestions on how to stop this that won't cost more than a used car are welcome. I don't think I do that much more than your average parent. It's just that my kiddo isn't likely to need less help in the near future. We are working on getting insurance to cover the wheelchair modifications that will greatly improve his quality of life, but I've already been told to expect multiple appeals before it happens. That being said, first thing in the morning when I get him up, he sits on my lap and gives me the sweetest, warmest hugs. He's a happy person and I can usually expect smiles every time I speak to him. He is smart and observant. In that sense, we are lucky. Little guy has a great memory and asks a lot of questions. He likes video games and has friends he enjoys playing with. He likes to watch wrestling and his teachers and therapists use that to motivate him. Raising him is rewarding in every way raising any other child would be, but challenging in ways the parent of a typical child couldn't imagine. I often worry about what will happen to my boy when he's an adult or when his father and I die. I want him to have the same options as any other kid would have, but understand that might not be possible, and it kills me. Everything considered, if I go back before he existed, knowing his disability, I'd still want him as my child. His challenges don't invalidate his life. Knowing how hard things can be makes me infinitely more compassionate towards those who choose not to carry a term child with disabilities. Story 67. I am a sibling, not the parent, but have spoken at length with my mom about this and feel able to hopefully shed some light on this. It was when my brother was born that my parents found out something was wrong. 40 plus years ago now, much better technology. At that point, my parents did grieve that they didn't have a healthy child, but as their first, they had a limited point of reference. Within a few days, my mom had already adapted, as well as she could, but obviously my grandparents grieved too. However, from that point onwards, I don't think my parents had any regrets. He was a very happy child and a teenager. That being said, it wasn't going to be possible for him to have a full life, and I think what helped them be strong was making the life that he was going to be able to have the best possible. There are many other stories of things he got up to, alone and with my brother, born about 9 years later. I don't know if that changed during the end, but knowing my parents and the life they witnessed him enjoy, I doubt there were regrets. Just a great deal of pain and grief. Knowing it will happen doesn't make it any easier. However, I am fully aware and support with hopefully a great deal of understanding that had I been diagnosed with Downs before I was born, my mother probably would have terminated me. There was a high risk at that point due to my mother's age. That being said, my brother's condition was a hereditary condition passed down on the female side. At some point, I will have to decide with my partner whether I want to take that risk, and I'm not sure there is a test for it. This hurts more than I thought it would, but I hope it helps anyone reading. Story 68. I have 3 boys with autism. I wouldn't trade them for the world. They're still only young, so I don't know what they'll face as they grow older, but it's my job to grow them up to be able to face it with courage and a sense of humor. Having said that, school didn't suit them at all. The eldest was bullied relentlessly, and the younger two struggled with severe anxiety the whole time. I pulled the eldest one out 2 years ago, and the youngest a year ago, and they're different children now that they're being homeschooled. Confident, far more outgoing, far calmer, curious about the world, and the youngest, who was nonverbal, has started to speak in complex sentences that other people understand. He had to have massive amounts of therapy to get there as well, but it was in the far quieter, calmer atmosphere at home that he found the space and time to actually start talking one-on-one and not being interrupted. We have no money. I used to earn good money, but spend my time writing grants to get money off the government and various charities now instead, and reading up on financial advice and budgeting websites and how to make a pack of mints stretch to 3 meals for 5 people. I spent a huge amount of time at first reading up on and trying out various therapies and biochemical interventions, and we've done some really weird diets, some of which worked and some of which didn't. My youngest has a tendency to vanish, so I need to be watching him at all times when we go out, but that's about it. People pity me, which I feel quite bad about, because they are all very good-natured children, and I feel that has very little to do with me, and far more to do with their intrinsic natures. The eldest two are more Asperger-y, but the youngest one is definitely autistic, and they all have strong anxiety, which is part and parcel of autism anyway. The eldest has also been diagnosed with ADHD, but hasn't needed his meds since he left school. I still think the formal diagnosis is helpful, as he may need meds in the future depending on what he chooses to do. I feel a very big part of my job is to help my boys to discover their passions and then help them to meet the educational requirements to follow them. I'd like to give a shout out to r/autism and the associated subreddits. Being able to talk to autistic adults about what they needed and still need has changed the way I interact with my boys, what therapies they receive, and how they spend their time. I do believe that adult autistics are the best possible advocates for autistic children, and they should be listed to more closely and more often. I feel that for autistic people at least, the problem is not them, but in the way that they can be taken advantage of by people who are cruel or thoughtless in our society. A lot of autistic people, even severely autistic people, have a lot to offer the world, if the world gave them the space to contribute what they have to give. Story 69. I'm a behavior therapist for kids ages 2 to 16 with developmental disabilities or disorders that have behavioral changes. Only personally worked with kids who have autism, but my company sometimes have kids with crippling phobias or OCD, or they might have Downs, but mostly kids with autism. So that's really what I can speak on and not any other types of disabilities. There's just a huge broad spectrum in what disabled can mean, even with things that we normally think of as impossible to really change or combat the symptoms of. My father has 2 siblings with Downs. One could probably have learned to be somewhat independent if she had early intervention and had learned how to do it and how to cope. And her brother with Downs basically just exists in a perpetual sunny state of existence, but can't really take care of himself. Nonetheless, it was the 60s, so of course their parents didn't really have any resources and just had to do everything themselves. They loved their children dearly, but at this point, their children were so accustomed to living with their parents for 50 plus years that removing them from the family would have been cruel and hard to explain to them. I never asked the type of question Opie had to them, but given how they continued to have kids after one with Downs, I don't think they regretted it, at least not in their kids' childhood. My family regales me with stories of how my grandfather got onto a state board of education to try and push for changes in schools to support kids with special needs, based on what he saw his kids needed but weren't getting. As for the kids I work with at my job, I can see some of the different stresses on the parents. One client I have, his parents are often reluctant to bring him places because he still starts screeching like a gibberish word, seemingly at random. And if anyone speaks to him, it's almost always to make him do it even louder. It's frustrating for everyone. The parents feel embarrassed by all the people staring at them and probably thinking, dude, control your kid. And the kid is probably also frustrated because he wants or needs something but can't express it. Or he's trying to express something else and got reprimanded for it. This child is in elementary school, and the most real words I've heard him say at once is requesting an item when someone else is holding something he wants, a specific skill we taught him. Right now we're working on teaching him how to say stop when he wants something to end, so that when he's frustrated, he doesn't have to hit someone or scream to make it go away. Our biggest victory recently was when I asked him what the weather is like out, and he looked at the window and he gave me an answer. I think for a lot of people that kind of latency in development is so hard to fathom, so when it happens to their kid, they're stressed out and don't know how to handle it. One of the things that my supervisor and I do, and I'm sure others do as well, is remind parents how far their kid has come. because it's easy to feel like they're never going to improve, and it's easy to feel like there are just too many things in the way of the kid being at all independent or to just live a happy life in general. But we make sheets of things that the kid has improved on or mastered since we started therapy with them or talked to the parents after a session, like today he did a structured activity by himself, or today he asked for help completely on his own. And he definitely has improved, but you don't see that on the bad days. On the bad days, you are freaking out because your kid is becoming more aggressive because he can't communicate what he wants and it's frustrating him. And the only way he thinks he can get what he needs, usually to end something he doesn't like or to be removed from a situation, is to lash out and hit people. The most common question I get from my clients' parents is something to the effect of, will my child ever be normal? Because, well, of course, that's what the parents want. They want their kids to be happy. They hate seeing this, where their child can't convey his needs as a result that they can't help him, or when other kids at school are mean because their kid is different, or when their kid can't do normal kid things because he doesn't know how. But I'm sure they also don't want to be taking care of their children into old age like my father's parents. After parenting for so many years, even if you love your children, you're ready for a break. It's exhausting, even in the best of cases, and a lot of parents with disabled children don't ever get that break. The silver lining is that psychology and all those other fields related to special needs kids are growing and improving. Autism in particular is getting tons of focus and research. During my undergrad senior seminar, which focused on autism, we read about a study that researchers predicted the onset of autism with high accuracy in infants using a machine that tracks eye movement. Insurance companies are starting to pay for services like what I do in some parts of the country, and more schools have trained professionals to help kids. Early intervention is becoming easier and more affordable, and that's critical because the earlier the intervention starts, the sooner and easier it is to teach the kid how to cope and overcome the various behavioral or skill deficiencies they might have, like communication skills. I think over time there will be less regret or guilt involved in children with special needs because services for them and their parents are becoming higher quality, more affordable, and a lot more accessible. It's slow going, but I hope eventually the question of, do you regret having kids since your kid has this disability, will be answered with, no, because we got help, and even if the life my kid leads isn't normal, they're happy, and so are we. Story 70. Honestly, yes. I absolutely love my son, but our lives, his, mine, my partner, and his sibling, are incredibly difficult, and we struggle every day just to get through it. My son is 12 and is severely autistic. He can communicate, but at about the level of a 2 to 3-year-old. He has severe OCD issues to the point that we often can't go out in public. He is stuck developmentally at about 4 years old and still wants to watch shows and play games appropriate for that age group. It is getting more difficult as he gets older and still wants to play on playgrounds, bounce houses, etc., and is simply too big but doesn't understand that. We frequently see signs that there is so much going on in his head that he just cannot communicate to us. It is really difficult for him. He doesn't understand actions and results, so he will get upset and destroy his favorite toy and then not understand why that toy doesn't work the next time. He hits people and then doesn't understand why they don't want to play with him again. I worry every day about his future. He will probably be a very large adult and is already physically hard to control. When he is happy, the world is wonderful, an amazing place. But when he's having a bad day, I fear for everyone's physical safety from him and his safety, both from himself and eventually whatever authority figures might step in. So we do everything we can to keep him happy, even if it means the rest of us never really are.